Okay, good evening. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:02. First item on our agenda is a public input. Would any members of the public present like to address the board? Seeing none, we'll have another one towards the end as well. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Anyone like to make a motion to accept that? Steve? Pam, second? Yep. Any discussion? Okay.
September 27th, plans, line 8, it has me as removed and open person. And Christy Peters was VFO. Line 145, I voted yes in support of the extra pay to align with the strategic vision.
Any further notes? No objections? Yeah.
To approve as amended.
Great. Second to move, yeah. Pam? All in favor? Oh, was George on or not?
He's not yet on.
Okay. All in favor? Unanimous. Next on our list is the superintendent's COVID metrics update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to report that as of this moment, there are one case of COVID-19 in the school. It was 0 earlier today, so literally that came up sometime today. But one active case in the school. Our community numbers are moderate. They're just at the border from green and blue. Our test positivity rate, which has not been updated since last week by the state, has remained a little bit above 5%, which is concerning. But that's that. So Hegan's in good shape.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on that? Any question? All right, seeing none. Next on our list is some seniors from Sohegan High School to present to us. Please introduce yourselves and present away.
Just a minute. If you guys could push the button on that mic in front of you and talk into that, that'd be perfect. Test run.
Mike, what button is it? Oh, that would make sense. Okay. Hi, my name is Sierra Kimball,
My name is Jackie Hayden.
And my name is Maddie Daniel.
and we're here to talk about kind of just how our senior year has been going so far. Just to start off, we kind of wanted to talk about what a typical day is like. So we kind of are getting still used to the new time change and different times of different classes. A typical senior has about 2 free periods. Some have 3, some have 1, depending on the different course load that they're taking. That's pretty much it.
Freshman senior day. So we did freshman senior day a little bit differently this year. We had our senior leadership members leading the tours around the school for the freshmen, and this was just a way to help the freshmen feel comfortable and feel adjusted to the school. Something else we did differently was the same people that were in senior leadership also walked with the freshmen during the welcome walk outside because we wanted them to feel more comfortable and less intimidated by just coming into the school. And I think it went really well.
Yeah, so the biggest thing on most seniors' minds right now is college and scholarship applications. So seniors have been working pretty diligently these past couple months to kind of grind out getting in their Common App, working with Writing Center coaches, working with in their English classes, as well as with guidance counselors to finalize common applications and essays for a bunch of different scholarships and colleges and supplementals of all sorts. One of the things that a couple seniors have been working on with Mike and other administration members has been to kind of streamline the process for next year of helping juniors kind of realize what the college process really entails so that they know a little bit about that before they start their senior year.
So one big part of our community is ethics forum. So we've just put off our Hope for Gus football game. We were able to raise over $17,000, which will all go back to the Hope for Gus Foundation. We actually set a school record for the amount of money raised, which was awesome. We're getting ready to do Operation Pumpkin this Friday at the Mount Vernon Village School. The Amherst Garden Center was kind enough to donate over 250 pumpkins for us to paint and bring up to them. And we're excited to do our dance and our skit for them on Friday.
Next up, we have fall sports. So students at Sauhegan are really excited because we've been able to have normal seasons again, and that's something that's just really exciting. Another thing that was implemented into our school was Sabre Superfan, and that's been a really positive experience because it's been able to bring in people to games, people to get dressed up, and just bring some good school spirit. So yeah.
So Jackie and Sierra, if I could interrupt you for a second. So last Friday, there was a soccer game out there. I heard something about this. It was tied going into double overtime. And then how did it end?
Well, we did come up on top in the last 4 minutes of overtime, which was awesome. It was a very stressful game, but it was a great way to end our season.
Yeah, so the next thing up there is senior project. This year we did our senior project a little bit differently with the mentor selection process. This year we did a lottery system, so seniors ranked their top 8 teachers, and then Brian Lemieux, who's awesome, has been hard at work to kind of make sure each student is assigned to one of those 8 teachers. And just recently we got that back, and now seniors are kind of working on connecting with those mentors, as well as preparing for their first panel meetings and their proposal letters.
All right, so next up is the senior hike. In the beginning, we had a little bit of an issue with buses, but we were able to find a bus company that really accommodated our needs for both sports and for the senior hike. We just want to give a big thank you to Matt McDonald and Sarah Barbado for making this happen, and Mike Berry. We had a really great experience on the hike. A lot of people went, and even though we were really tired, it was just a really great experience that we're all going to remember.
And finally, we're all getting used to a new grading system. We're using PowerSchool now, and with the November 5th end of the grading period coming up, we're putting together a presentation for Monday at Sabre Spotlight to kind of give the whole school a kind of an overview on what it is and the different tools it provides. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much. It's nice to get that perspective from time to time. Any discussion points from any board members or questions, comments? Yeah, Pam.
Yeah, so this senior project mentoring, in the past, I know it's kind of always been difficult to get the mentor that you want because it's a scramble. Right? People are like lining them up in their junior year for the senior year. So this year it's more of almost kind of like a lottery phase, not really a lottery, but kind of everybody do it at the same time. They pick their top 8, and then it goes out, and then Ryan and whoever else helps them figure out how to get one of those teachers to each student.
Yeah, so basically what happened was in early September, actually late September, right around the 30th, Brian sent out a Google form to all the students at Sauhegan and had us rank like top 8 teachers that we want to work with for our senior project. Then everyone was required to send that in at the same time. And then I'm pretty sure he used like a random number-based system and assigned each of us a number. And then went through that list of numbers and kind of was like number 1 can get their number 1 option. And then kind of slowly went down based on if your first choice wasn't available, then you get your second choice. If your second choice wasn't available,
school. So hopefully then anybody who was trying to get their senior mentor or senior project mentors last year, that kind of got pushed aside and we got restarted at the same time. That's great. Glad to hear there's a little bit more equity in that, that process. Good job.
Anybody else? No, thanks again for the presentation. Appreciate it very much.
You guys don't have to stay, by the way. You're welcome to, but you probably have other things you'd rather be doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up is our Facilities Director, Roger Preston, to update us and discuss the Annex Science Labs.
How you doing, everyone?
Great.
Good. So back on May 26, me and members of the JFAC subcommittee for 2.0 and also Nathan Carl took a tour of all of the labs at Sauhegan and the labs in the annex building. Nathan and his team actually expressed the importance of just renovating the annex labs at the time. We talked about where were the priorities in the main building and the annex labs, and we found that his team really thought that the annex labs were really where our major concentration should be to start. Some of the highlights for that are just the rooms are too small, according to the National Science Teaching Association. The desks are too small for the size of the students. There's too many sinks that are too small to be functional. There's no exhaust hoods in the rooms. There's existing counters that are not the right material or for chemical work in there. And current facilities make it difficult, if not impossible, to provide the curriculum necessary to be classified as advanced placement or dual enrollment. As a result of that meeting in May, I actually, the members of the JFAC asked me to really what were the next steps there. We have proposals that we have just conceptual designs for, but if we really wanted to find out what these projects are going to cost us, I suggested that we reach out to an architect just to help us to go over the program review, look at the spaces and come up with schematic designs that we can use for bidding to construction managers so that we can see what these science labs will actually cost. So with that, I took a walkthrough of the spaces with Banwell Architects. We really reviewed the 6 rooms. We reviewed the storage rooms in there, and Banwell came back to me with just the proposal that I've put in your packet today. Schematic design for this proposal is $8,845. At this point, that's really all I'm asking that we move forward with. With those schematic designs, we can use them for bidding, like I said, in an RFP to construction managers, which will be able to receive the cost of these science rooms. There's been talk too as whether or not we do 1 of them, 2 of them, or 3 of them, or actually, I'm sorry, it's 3 science labs, 2 science labs, or 1 science labs is the proposal from the first set of conceptuals. So with these bid documents in the RFP, we'll be able to use this so that the board will select how they want to move forward in the future. So in my packet, I'm really just looking for us to have approval for the schematic design. And I know Mrs. Grund was a big part of this as well, so if she has anything to add.
Yeah, so first I want to thank Roger for all of his work. We, the Sauhegan 2.0 subcommittee out of JFAC did a tour with him of the science labs and noticed all of the needs. So not even just what's in this proposal of redoing the science labs, because the size, I mean, I've been in and out of the rooms, but when you're standing there with, was it like 6 or 7 adults standing in the room and you realize there's 20 kids and a teacher and they're trying to do an AP biology lab and you're going, oh my God, how are they doing this safely? It really opened your eyes up. And last year we did hold off because we didn't think we had all the right information of what needed done. And we felt we were going to be pushing through something we weren't ready to do. So now that I know Sauhegan 2.0 is definitely behind this, definitely looking to do something either in the budget, warrant article, something to get this done. it shows, even just general maintenance, which, you know, Roger, who walked through and asked the teachers to utilize school dude, and so we can get certain basic maintenance to be done that should be just in the budget anyway. But this is the big rooms that need done. So, you know, hopefully we can get all three in this year's budget. And I think because of the great job Roger's doing with the front entrance and getting the budget where we have the $250,000, we're bringing it down on the actual cost, that maybe even we'll have leftover money from that we can then just supplement and use and get all the rooms done this year. Cross our fingers. But this, I think, is a great step in the right direction.
Definitely.
So I guess I don't have a good sense of how much food lab could cost. In my head, this would be something that would never be reported in a normal budget.
Right. So we're talking about certain rooms which already are set up to do the labs. There's just needs to be renovating, and it's taking how many rooms down to 3?
It's six classrooms to 3.
To 3. So we can utilize some of the stuff that's still there if it's done right. But it's not the chemistry lab. So it's not the expensive hoods and things like that cost the big money you're thinking. It's more outfitting the classrooms correctly for the right tables, the right space, the right water, all that stuff they need to do the biology labs, I forget which rooms are over there off the top of my head. Biology is over there. The advanced biology is over there. It's not the chemistry ones. Maybe environmental. So it's anatomy.
I'll say it again. So, so just light water and gas repiping, nothing extensive,
And moving the walls.
and moving the walls
Isn't that-
and furniture, clearly.
Yeah. And last year we had an estimate of, we thought was kind of high. We just weren't 100% sure. So we're going back and asking the architects to take another look and see if we can bring that down.
I would certainly be in favor of trying to squeeze in a normal budget cycle rather than have to go out and spend $200 bucks.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Thanks a lot, Roger.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Next up, we were going to hear from Mike Berry, but we're going to actually move that to before our budget discussion, because it ties in to that directly. So we can get all the budget items together, which brings us to our reports received. And those. There we go. So we're just going to list them off, and if anyone has a discussion point, just raise your hand and we will discuss. The first one is our October board report. Oh, that's the principal's report? And we're going to push that? Is that the one in the same?
Yep. The October board report is in the packet.
Right. It's the October's principals report.
Principal's report. I'm sorry.
Principal's
What did I
report.
say?
That's what I said.
Okay.
So
It's different than the item.
different from the item above.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll just start with that then.
Okay.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Sure. So first of all, Mike, thank you for the report. It has a lot of information in it now, and it's great to read. A couple questions. First of all, I also want to say 170 walkthroughs in the school and starting to give feedback is incredible. And I think that's fantastic and says a lot of really wanting to work with the teachers and move the school forward. So thank you for all that hard work. That's fantastic. The dean of students had in the report talked about punctuality. So my question is, Can you explain what's going on?
In what regard?
How punctual are our students? Is it a morning thing due to kids not coming in the morning? Is it more just general not showing up to class because they're lingering in the hall?
Well, I think, one of the, when you look at the Sauhegan Six and it's, they have one that talks about be on time and be accountable and be responsible. And one of the things that we wanted to work out on, coming out of a year where we weren't in school and it was really wide open and Sauhegan, with an open campus, with no bells, it's loose, it's a little casual, and we want to maximize our instructional time at the beginning and at the end of class. And so having teachers, staff, students focus on being where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there is a point that we thought was timely and appropriate to kind of meet some of our other goals. And so we spent the first, few Mondays kind of highlighting this as a school, and John Barry and Robin Bauquet and Linda Connolly kind of partnered to kind of gather some data to see kind of what was happening, being realistic that, kids were transitioning back from the schedule that they had. Buses are a little bit, late, some days and inconsistent. But really what we wanted is, kids, especially between like the arrival time, not so much the arrival to school, but once they were here, being where they were supposed to be. And overall, it's pretty good. Kids are getting where they're supposed to be, but, there is a desire to be a bit more, timely and punctual just for the good of the order and to maximize our instructional time. And so that's really why that has some attention for
Okay,
us.
so it's not like there's an ongoing,
No, we're not, there's no real reason to panic.
okay.
Yes, Steve, go ahead.
So the enrollment numbers, I find the presentation confusing. In my mind, there are three kinds of students. There are students who apply, whose presence adds to our average daily membership. Some of those might be receiving remote instruction, so there's a little subset of those that are remote. And then there's others who don't add to our average daily membership that we're supporting in some way. And I can't tell this homeschool number that's reported in here, which of those buckets they fall in. So I would ask for my linear mind for a slightly clearer presentation going forward of the.
Yeah, I can make note of that. I can make note of that and make it a bit more clear. There is different pathways to be enrolled at Sauhegan. And you can be a full-time student and take one class, because you are, individualizing your experience by supplementing with other experiences. And so what we'll do is we'll take a look at this and see if we can't kind of play around with it to make it more clear for more people, not just you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And to me, it comes back to the ADM is the magic number. So knowing where that is very important to me.
Right, that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of calculations that are contingent on that. Anybody else? Yeah, Stephanie, another? Sure.
So I'm just kind of curious how, Mike, just when you walk through the school, how are our teachers doing? We know last year socially or just emotionally, I mean, it was a tough year with teaching dual modality and having kids coming, going, and just the style of teaching. We know they're exhausted, and I heard there's a lot of energy in the school because everyone's back in and they're feeling good about it. How are they doing? Are they?
I think if you ask the average educator who comes to work every day, this year, in many instances, probably more difficult than last year. We talk about last year was a year where we were kind of all over the place, and the expectations of being where you're supposed to be and some of the academic expectations were not quite as, rigorous or intellectually challenging or high as in previous years. So now we're coming out of that year and we still have expectations. We're still in 170 classrooms. We are still having professional development. We're still Division I and JLP and senior project and senior hike, and we're still doing all these things. Meanwhile, the expectation is we're going to be the best teachers that we can be, in our classrooms. And even coming out of a COVID year, Souhegan's a complex organization where you have your teaching responsibilities, but then you have all these other things that you're responsible for, and that's very unique. And so the school has been designed on idealistic principles that are really hard to sustain in any given year. And now you add this, so tired, I would absolutely agree with that. Do people have a lot going on outside, the work day and in their lives? Absolutely. Just like many families do, as they're navigating this period of, history. So I think overall they've handled it pretty well. They come here, they work really hard. They, support the students to do the best they can. But, to say, hey, everything is all right, and the answer would be no. That wouldn't be honest. But people are doing the best. They're well-intentioned, and I appreciate the efforts that they do on a daily basis.
I think we all do, and just want to say thank you for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. No one else is
One
raising
last
their
thing I
hand.
wanted to say is exciting news about our jazz all-state results. We have 5 students. I think it's the highest number we've sent to all-state jazz in 1 year. Andrew Rossi, Will Upton, Adam Horrocks, Jeremy Klapka, Zealand Broadley, and Autumn Fischera are all going, so that's fantastic.
I was just curious on the calendar, Mike, how well attended was the, where is it? The flu clinic the other day?
That's a good question. I know I had an appointment, but if I'd have to check in for the final numbers, but I do know quite a bit of people took advantage of that opportunity, and it's really convenient when you have the opportunity to go during a planned period or before or after school. So I know a number of people. I just don't have the definitive number.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Laura.
I wanted to mention the counseling department where they have the early action deadline listed as November 1st. Quite a few applications are October 15th. And I know when my own students that have to use the October 15th deadline, it's difficult to get their references in time because so many people say it's November 1st. So I just wanted to.
I know it varies.
Right.
There's a couple different deadlines depending what, direction you want to go in. So.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it
All right.
very much. SHS organizational chart is next on our dot reports received. Any discussion on that?
Mike, can you fill us in on, this is a new structure for this year. Can you at least talk about it a little?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to pull that up. I have a lot to talk about. Just give me 1 second here. Well, it's not as pretty as if some other people at Souhegan would have created it, but this is something I created. So it's very simple. And I'm embarrassed on how long it took me to kind of create, and then I really had to have Amanda kind of help to clean it up. And I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of go through this and kind of look at it. And the way we organized it is there's a couple different sides of the school and the organization, and you see things like, the dean of faculty, and then kind of, the dean of students side of things, the special education administrator, director of counseling, and director of athletics. And then underneath that, you would see, domain leaders and campus coordinator, teachers. And so what we tried to do is just to organize this in the most logical fashion so we could be aware of who's in charge of who and who works with who and who collaborates with who. And, as mentioned, Sauhegan's a big, small school. For a school with 700 kids, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different, kind of like niches and, and lanes here. And so this is our attempt at, putting this together. And then next year when we have to do this, we'll probably look a little bit different, but the essence of it is still the same.
What is our current thinking on the domain leader for science as opposed to combined math and science?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you to defer that question to later in the program when we talk about budget,
Right,
if you wouldn't mind.
sure. Sure.
Question on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just I call it the life skills program. Who oversees that? Is the SAU oversee that, or is it our own special education administrator that oversees that?
Jen Hewitt oversees
Jen
it,
oversees it?
and Meg oversees her and assists quite a bit. Jen's very capable.
Anything else?
No, this is excellent. Thank you.
All right. Next item is the long-term leave plan. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Laura?
Are you just informing us that we have one long-term sub and our other, I was trying to follow, like, are you asking? Is
Yeah,
this-
no, so what we wanted to do with this, this summary is say, the process, when we, have to have a short-term or a long-term sub and kind of what we do to make sure we fill those needs. And what I think you'll see here at Sauhegan, that might be something that becomes more common. And so we just wanted to articulate our process and our thoughts on what that looks like for us. And honestly, in my career as an educator, I've never really had to think about it too often, but given the circumstances that we're in and given like the dynamics at Sauhegan High School, it is something that we wanted to formalize and articulate a little bit more.
There was a question earlier in the school year from the board about how we were covering long-term subs. So this is in response to that
Okay,
request.
Yeah.
what's the difference in pay in long-term versus daily sub?
Yeah, you want to take
Yeah, so
that?
the daily sub gets paid a daily sub rate. The long-term subs get paid as if they were a first-year bachelor step 0 teacher. It's the very bottom rung of the teacher pay scale. I believe that's what pay scale is.
Okay, well, my next question is, if they're a long-term sub, do they get 4 planning periods? And a regular sub works all day? How, is that correct? So is it to our disadvantage to make a long-term sub?
Well, so that's partially correct, but after a certain number of days, I believe it's 10 or is it 15? You can only have a short-term sub in a class for a number of days.
Okay,
Up to 20, then they have to be credentialed by the DOE.
okay,
So we're kind of required to give a long-term sub after 20 days.
okay. So, and that person has like 4 planning periods and then 4
Teaching,
classes?
they're planning, they're assessing and grading, they're
Right,
advisory.
okay.
It's a full-time position as opposed to coming in and full.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none. Next is our September treasurer's report. Go
I know
ahead.
I should ask this to our treasurer, but Amy, maybe you have an idea. I'm looking at all the credit card charges and we're getting, it seems like they're getting more and more and more of the fees that we're absorbing. Do we have an analysis of what it looked like even last year? And last year's such a strange year because we don't have, I'm just wondering, I just feel like we're starting to absorb over almost like $2,000 a month now, or it's getting close to that. And then before it was only gonna be like for the whole year. Right. And I'm just wondering if we need to start pushing back a bit. Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else?
I had a couple questions.
Okay, go ahead.
The Hudson Toyota, 32,000, which vehicle was that? Was that a vehicle? Okay.
Well, however, this is payment made after a purchase order was made that board approved previously as part of the manifest approval process, right?
Is this one of the special ed cars?
This is a special ed vehicle.
Cars that we approved in the budget.
Right, I'm just asking what we purchased, that's all.
Did you have another item for that?
I'll ask privately,
Okay,
it's okay.
all right. Next up is our CIP plan, 2023 to 2028. Comments, questions?
Just gonna say thank you to everyone working on that.
Yeah, really, seriously.
Steve, I think are you in on that?
Yes, he was on the committee.
Yes, and if you have questions, I refer you to my presentation to the Board of Selectmen, which is on their video stream from 2 weeks ago.
I just have one comment. I feel like the high school is a little shortchanged on the CIP going forward. When you look at it, it's the middle school gets 600,000 and the high school gets about 100,000 or less almost every year, going on for like 5 or 10 years. And I just feel like, we have maintenance needs as well. And is that going to meet everything that we need to do?
That comes directly from the capital, whatever, CNA, Capital Needs Assessment, thank you. A plan that was done by the consultants a few years ago. And if anything, it reflects the fact that the high school has been able to do more frequent maintenance on its plant than the Amherst School Districts have been able to do.
In fact,
So-
wasn't there a 10-year CNA plan for high school that was completed about 5 years ago?
Yes, but it was not as in-depth as the new one. But essentially, this one is estimates based on expected service life of just about every piece of replaceable equipment in the building. So it just reflects that we're in a pretty good place. It doesn't mean we should stop spending money, but we don't need to spend more. This is, as far as I know, keeps us in a good position. If you want to stop for a few years, then we'll need to spend amounts like the Amherst School District does.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, and it should be said to the public who's paying attention that this is a major piece of work that the town and the school districts do to try to minimize and smooth out tax impacts in a smart and intelligible way so that we don't have facilities that can't operate and that we don't get hit with big bills all at the same time. So it's good governance, is what it is. All right, any other comments on the CIP plan? Seeing none. Next is our tax impact forecast for the same. I guess they're kind of related. I'll assume there's no further comments on that, considering the relationship. Our September facilities report is yet again an impressive list. Thank you, Roger, for continuing the provide us this updates, and the pictures are very illustrative. Any questions? Go ahead, Laura.
I want to say thank you, Roger, for managing the projects. The school is visibly better this year than it was, and the potholes that I've been driving around for years are now filled this year. It's just really nice. Thank you.
Yes, Steph.
So, two questions, well, three questions. One, you're doing a daily water reading.
Yes.
Out of curiosity, what are you getting from that information?
It just tells us how much the building is using water-wise for how many occupants we have inside of it.
And there's nothing like your.
It's just data that I like to collect so that we know how much water each individual is using each day.
Okay. The 2022 Ford Transit for the athletic department upcoming
Yes, so that's a discussion here for tonight as well.
for the budget.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, actually,
No, it's
no.
not.
it's in here.
For this current fiscal year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll speak to that. As the board is certainly aware, we've had unprecedented troubles with transportation this year. One of the things we've discovered in our athletic department year is there's a statute that has existed for a long time that we've not taken advantage of recently, although Sauhegan used to. And that is the mixed pupil bus statute, which essentially means any vehicle that the school district owns or leases can be driven by school personnel for activities and athletics. And so we've partnered with the Amherst Rec Department this year to borrow their vehicle on a number of occasions to get some of our smaller teams to games. And what we've discovered is that for some of our smaller athletic events and smaller extracurricular events that require a bus, where a bus might cost $1,000 or more for an event, if we were to own a vehicle, we would likely see a return on that investment in about a year's time, if not sooner than that. And so there's a 30-week lead time on those vehicles. And so my suggestion to the board, and Roger included in his report, is while we're ordering another vehicle for special ed, that we order two and have it be available as a mixed-use bus. We would work with our people who would be driving those vehicles to receive extra driver training, ensure they have insurance, a clean record, all of those sort of things before they drove our students. But this is not only a cost-effective way to get our students, our smaller groups of students to events, but it might be the only way come the spring to get some kids to some events. At our middle school level in particular this year, there have been several occasions where middle school students have had to find their way to away games in Salem or Londonderry or other places because we just haven't had the buses. So we're trying to be proactive about getting out in front of that. So our plan is to purchase that second vehicle with funds we have in the budget this year, and starting the spring season, start to recoup the cost of that vehicle. We're not going to break even in the spring because we're not going to have that many trips to be able to get it done. But I really suspect, and Kelly Braley's here, that we'd be in the black on that purchase very quickly. It does not have there's no other impact that we have financially besides we have to buy some gas now. There's no added expenses for the people driving, and our insurance is not affected directly either. So Kelly's here as well to answer questions about that.
So how many kids would be on this? It's more of a van.
It's a 12-passenger vehicle, so a driver and 11 students.
So which sports would be able to?
Kelly, would you mind coming up?
Yeah.
Very excited. It's my first meeting.
Athletic Director Braley is also Coach Braley, who's coaching in the
Yes.
semifinal field hockey game tomorrow, 5 o'clock, Exeter Bilbao Stadium.
Woo, let's go. So in putting together just a brief list of not only the teams that can use this, but some clubs as well. Cross-country, indoor and outdoor track will be able to use it for Meet of Champions, any smaller events they go to in Connecticut, New England's in Thetford, Vermont, things like that, for a total of about 10 times per year for both, over all three of those sports. Math team will be able to use it to attend 4 to 5 events. all state auditions twice a year. Our swimming team will be able to use that 5 to 7 times a year. Bowling will be able to use that 5 to 8 times a year. Golf will be able to use it for all of its matches, which is a minimum of 7. And if we qualify for the team tournament and individual, that's another 3. So a max of 10 times a year. Ethics Forum will be able to use it for their outreach programs, for smaller events that they do, for hype setup and things like that, for 3 to 5 times a year. Our Granite State Challenge team will be able to use it to attend competitions. Our Spirit team, as it is right now, if it grows a little bit more, we might have to look at alternative means, but right now we can use that 4 to 5 times a year. Outing Club would be able to use it for trips that they decide to take. Mock Trial will be able to use it if they go to, if they make it to the state finals at the UNH Law in Concord and also to the Nashua Courthouse. And I'm sure that there are some other groups that will be able to use it. I think it would be a great opportunity for advisories to be able to get out in the community, to do some community service projects, smaller teams to be able to go. A basketball team wants to go scrimmage and it's just varsity. We might be able to throw, enough. That might be large enough to put those people, the players in there. So I think it could be a phenomenal opportunity for us to have.
And those are all groups that currently use buses to.
And yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny when I have to get a 55, a regular school bus for 8 golfers to go, and those trips are golf is an average of $475 a trip.
Go ahead, Pam.
So I was gonna ask for clarification from Adam. So you're saying that typically it's $1,000 or is it more closer now, $475?
It depends on the sport.
So
Yeah.
even if they conservatively say it's $500 per trip, I counted roughly about at least 80 occurrences. So, there you go, right there. All right, that's huge money that you're saving. And there's no way a vehicle like that costs that much probably anyway. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, Steve.
So I think when the school opened, it opened with 2 vans. I know for a fact that by the time I got on the board, there was one left. It was on its last legs and the board agonized over replacing or not. And at that time, the administration made the decision, it was easier to go with the bus company for everything and not own the van. But times have changed with bus companies.
It is easier, it's just very, very expensive. as
Right,
well.
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Should we, if we go forward with this, is there money we should be budgeting for? I'm just thinking, like, regular maintenance of the van, you've got oil changes, you're gonna have tires, you're gonna have stuff like that that's gonna rack up, which is probably who's gonna drive it, get it there and do those things, coordination.
Yeah, so we would make a transfer next year in the bus transportation line for athletics to cover those sort of things, and then budget moving forward. I think we're going to learn as we go about what it really costs on a regular basis. So I don't think we're carrying anything in this next budget that we would learn from it and transfer the existing funds. Because again, we would, in next year's budget, if we pay for it out of this year's budget, it's saving us, every single one of those trips is saving us $500 to $1,000 per trip that we have available for maintenance and tires and whatever else, which is a boom for next year's budget.
Laura.
Should be purchasing rather than leasing.
Correct. What we would pay to lease a vehicle with the amount of miles we're going to put on it would be hard to find. Plus, we're able to purchase off the New Hampshire State bid contract, which is significantly less expensive than even a retail price. Part of the reason of the 30-week lead time, because they're all on the bid contracts are all built to order. You have to wait. It never comes from dealer inventory. It always gets made, but we save significantly. In fact, it's unrelated, but our last facilities director, with money that was budgeted to buy a truck, bought an F-450 flatbed truck that's hardly ever used. We're actually planning to sell that for about 10 grand more than we paid for it, and downgrade to an F-250 with an actual truck bed off the state bid contract, which is an incredibly low number compared to what trucks are going for now.
That's like $25,000 for an F-250 with a plow package.
Yeah, it's it's half the cost of what new trucks are going for.
So when do you expect to have it here and in use?
30 weeks.
It's 30 weeks from the day we order it.
Okay.
Assuming those chips are made and
You
everything
don't
else.
even- It's in the budget. You don't even need our permission. This is your decision. You're just telling us about it.
Well, because we didn't budget for a vehicle purchase specifically, I wanted the board to be aware of what we were doing because it's a reallocation of funds you did budget.
Okay.
I felt it was in the interest of transparency to let you guys know.
And it's 50,000, 100,000? What, how much do you expect the? Okay.
Cost of the van?
42,000, right?
Yeah, it's 225, but then
Okay.
inspection and just registration, so about 42.
And Roger offered to wash it, was it every week you said?
Every other.
Um,
It's white, so we don't have to wash it that much.
I have two questions. 12 passengers, first of all, great work. Thanks for being creative in the thinking and finding all of these clubs and athletics that could take advantage of it. I'm just presuming, but just to confirm, like 12 people, but that also includes stuff, 12 golf bags, 12, big
Yeah,
bulky items.
the vans that so it's turned out that I've had to go to Enterprise and rent a van about 4 times this year, the same van that we're purchasing. And there is quite a bit of cargo space in the back. So the 8 golf bags fit
It's fine.
beautifully.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
no problem.
And then I guess the bigger, broader question is one enough? I mean, if it makes sense, is 2 or
So yes,
where?
we want to start small. However, the other thing that we're investigating is the purchase of an actual school bus for larger teams that we operate only for activities and athletics. In our last bus contract, we specifically included a provision that allows us to do that. Our last bus contract wouldn't have allowed us to do that. But our current bus contract specifically allows us, if we wanted to purchase and run vehicles for athletics or for activities and field trips. And the reason why I'm interested in doing that is because, number one, I think it's cost effective. And second, the availability for our students, specifically around field trips. If you've ever chaperoned a field trip to Boston or anywhere an hour away, you know that you can't leave in the morning until the second bus run has been completed and the bus comes back to the school. And then you have to leave wherever you're at in time to get back for the afternoon bus run, which means you're sometimes only there at where you want to go for about 2.5 hours. And by the way, kids all want to eat lunch during that time as well. And so the academic value of those field trips is really affected by that. And so our thought is, and we're not ready to move forward quite yet, but just to share our thinking. Our thinking is if we can find the right person that is willing to be that is a certified bus driver that wants to be sort of the owner of that bus, who operates it for us, maintains it for us on their time that we pay them for, it would probably save us a significant amount of money while also expanding the availability for field trips and make more availability for athletics. So I'm not ready to pull the trigger. I've been asking out in our community to find people. There might be a bus driver that doesn't want to deal with the daily home to school bus routes anymore, that would want to be an employee of ours. If I can find that right person or two that wants to take that on, then we'll kind of go to the next step with that. But we're not ready to do that quite yet. So I think one van for now. Let's make sure we can do this well, do this right, learn the things that we didn't know about before, and then expand as we move forward.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Do you need,
Go ahead, Laura.
do you need to put like $1 in the bus under a certain category of the budget?
No, the 2,700 function would cover all of our expenses anyway, and that's where the regular bus transportation is. So I think we're okay.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. She's sitting there.
Roger, I forgot to ask you when you were talking about the science labs, there's something else you and I had talked about, and we had talked about with the Sohegan, or the Sohegan 2.0 committee. skylights.
Yes.
Can you inform us what's going on there?
Thank you.
That one up, aren't
I am. We
So
need to know.
some of our skylights in the main building are actually leaking and taking in water. So what I have done is I've reached out to CalWall. They're a manufacturer of a translucent panel that would replace the existing skylights that we have here. Our skylights haven't failed recently. They failed many years ago, actually. The ones in the stairwells and actually in the hallway here, they have electronic louvers that open up. Those electronic louvers have actually been disconnected in years past, and the skylights themselves have been completely sealed with caulking up on top of the roof. Sealed with caulking to the point where that caulking has just dry rotted completely. So that tells me that that sealant has been put there years ago. There's actually, the skylights are manufactured to actually take in water at certain points and then just weep out the water at the bottom of the skylight. It's kind of like a brick wall system. Water comes in from the top and then is able to just weep through. Upon the repairs throughout the years, those complete weeps and the portions of those skylights that take in water have just been sealed up. Right intentions to stop the leak of the building, but it's actually compromised the system itself. So looking at it with CalWall, we did find that the pitch of certain skylights, we definitely would propose a different pitch, just more of an angle so that it drains the water more, because right now they're actually holding water up there as well. Upon installation, from what we can see from when the original building was built, there's two skylight sections over the stairwells. Down below, they look like two independent single skylights looking up at them, but when you actually go up to the roof, they're two skylights, but I can't speak to it because I wasn't here, but they've been merged together. There should be two single skylights independent of one another, but up on the roof, it either was the rough opening, or I can't speak to it, but they've been modified upon installation when the school was built. You can't tell that down here, but once going up to the roof, you can certainly see that. We walked it through with CalWall and we did look at that. So the actual repair for that is going to be a difficult modification of the building structure to get the new panels installed in those sections. Another thing that we're looking at as well is, because the existing skylights are transparent, that kind of raises just a little bit of a concern, because when you're on stairwells, you don't want to get the sun glare on you to actually cause a safety issue, where if you're blinded for a moment, you could trip down the stairwell. So we're looking at translucent panels rather than transparent. The other thing about it as well is the skylights up there, they don't actually hold a load. They should actually have a rail barrier around them. We have just our own technicians and HVAC technicians on the roof just up there, because that's where a lot of our work is performed. But right now they don't have any rails or anything. And all I'm getting at, if someone was to trip near these skylights, potentially they have a fall hazard. They could come through the skylight. Not only one story, but two story at certain sections. So I'm working with a vendor to just figure out budget costs to replace these panels with a CalWall type fixture.
Thank you. The reason I asked is just keep in mind, for unreserved fund balance usage, we might need some money.
Yeah, and Amy and I have started a list as well, and this is one of the items that is on the list.
Great, thanks a lot, Roger. Thanks. Oh, anybody else for Roger? Nope, okay. Got our AP dual enrollment report. Any comments or discussion points? Yeah. Go. Oh.
No, I was just going to say thank you for putting this together and having the discussion about, offerings going forward and what makes sense for students, for that, making that affordable next step, and what's the most impact for students going forward. So I appreciate you guys having that conversation and figuring it out.
Happy to do it. We're also,
Christine and I will be updating our annual report, and some of this data was incomplete there, other schools on AP results and things. So this will come up again when we present the next iteration of the annual report when more data comes out. But Dana and I have more conversation to have in this area about making sure what drives us and everything we do, Mike, is what's best for kids. We'll gladly keep working this through.
Go ahead, Laura.
Are you implying that AP is not our best option? I was trying to read between the lines.
No, it wasn't loaded with judgment at all. It was trying to be descriptive and just, it's just an interesting when a course is classified as AP and dual enrollment at the same time, just the impact of that curriculum wise and working through. So no, there really wasn't an intended judgment here, except I have more to learn and more to talk about with Dana about just reviewing. It's having such an investment in both programs is kind of unique. Typically schools are all invested in the dual or AP, but in Sauhegan, it's both, which again, there's no judgment. It's just further explore inquiry as to.
Right, but the dual enrollment to qualify, they're looking at the syllabus from an AP course. That's what was approved. So I'm just nervous about, I think it might be a detriment to students to remove the AP designation, even if they're getting dual enrollment
Sure.
credit, even if they don't take as many exams as they used to because of the dual enrollment. Having it on their transcript, it says, as I'm sure you're well aware, statistically how few minutes,
Right,
how few seconds that
Absolutely.
they get to look at the transcript at the college level. And I think showing rigor without them having to look for it is better serving our students. So I'm a strong supporter of keeping the AP
Thank you.
title.
And we do operate, we do no harm. We don't want to do anything, and that we do that would harm a youngster's opportunity for the next step. But again, just inquiry and looking. And I'm curious if there's time to find out how many transcripted credits are applied in the next iteration. And as I talked to Karen Janinis about looking again to see what colleges that the applications are received by students here, how they specifically are managing the AP. It just more of inquiry and interesting, so Dan and I can look at real data when we start just taking a look. But no, it's really inquiry.
In my spare time today, I did an assessment of the AP enrollment. And I noticed we have 100 less students enrolled in AP this year than last year. And specifically, no one is taking AP statistics.
I mean, I'll happily relook at that, and that number surprises me about that significant drop. So we will take a peek at that and get back to you. Thank you.
I mean, I could be wrong. I could spend more time on it, but.
It's more likely that it's something that I need to look at again. So.
Well, we just came out of the pandemic year where 10th graders weren't taking electives, which are prerequisites for some of the AP classes. So, we'll have a balance there.
I appreciate the highlight. Thank you, because we will dig in. So thank you very much.
I have one about just for the dual enrollment accreditations. There's 3 for the institutions that we're connected with. Is there a vision to add more institutions to either reduce cost or increase options and expanding the program
I'm
for
not
more
sure.
offerings?
Today, Adam, Christine, and I talked about just the transition to continue to look at expanding our partnership and our dual enrollment concurrent program with Southern Hampshire University. I did get some data about the cost for the University of New Orleans credit is $450. That piece, that was, I don't think I had that at the time of the memo. If it would increase the opportunity and future opportunities for kids, sure, we're always open. My gut says strengthen the current partnerships, but actually let's take a look and see what value those bring to the current level of students.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach. I guess the question would be whether those credits are, to what extent that those credits earned are accepted at other, universities and institutions. Because if you're getting the credit, but they're not applying to other places, then it's kind of not maybe worth the effort, potentially.
A program in New Hampshire, a common program, is Project Lead the Way, and that's an engineering program that works with RPI and WPI. So that's another area of transcripted credits that's common in New Hampshire. But I know firsthand that when the opportunity for a dual credit transcript in that $100 bill comes, it didn't ever factor into my son's, but it wasn't even thought of. You just do it. So I'm interested in finding the actual impact of that fee on the future. I know what it's billed as. Is that coming to fruition? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So hopefully this summer we can dig in and have data, not just about who's availing themselves of the opportunity, but who's actually implementing the opportunity.
Yeah. And just personal experience on the University of New Orleans. It's I have a child who's in that dual enrollment, and it's because it's a language arts and a social studies credit, so it's 900 for that, not
well, thank you.
450.
Little-
So that that's a lot more than 100. I tell you that.
No, and thank you for that. When I worked with Karen, it came across, but I appreciate that, John.
Right. In any event, I appreciate the work and look forward to further updates.
I have one question of
Yep, go ahead.
clarity. For the student data, the dual enrollment table, the students enrolled, that means how many students enrolled in dual enrollment? Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay. Thank you. Is there a larger portion this year for dual enrollment? I know the deadlines aren't quite here yet, but are the students taking advantage this year of the dual enrollment opportunities?
Steve, I can speak to that. It's been advertised in a couple different, platforms in different ways, via counseling office, Spotlight, the individual classes. And we'll know more information about that if students want to participate in those programs and those opportunities, probably, towards the end of next week when some of those deadlines have passed and we have the right information from the teachers. A lot of opportunity at Sauhegan. You can spread yourself thin very fast as a high school student in this area.
Good. Oh, Laura, you have another one? Go ahead. We're here.
I was just wondering about the AP statistics, but
Yeah,
that's probably not.
There is an
So-
AP stats course that is being offered this fall semester, so that is something, we have an updated master schedule we can provide.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think, no, that was my mistake. I sent it out too early, so.
Okay, thank you.
there is one.
All right. Anybody else? No? All right. Those are our reports received. And before moving on to policy, left off our agenda was
Yeah.
community council.
Yeah.
So please, sorry to keep you waiting. You were actually very high on our list originally. So pardon for the oversight.
Thank you. So we've been getting right to work in community council. The first proposal that we've passed was the community review board hearing reform policy. And so this changed the selection process for members of the CRB. So previously a random student was drawn from a lottery system to be on the CRB for a full year. but this proposal makes it so a new student is selected each case. And this is just to get more people involved in the CRB and so make it more likely for people to be able to come to meetings. Because if you're only required to go to one meeting, you're more likely to show up. And it also changed it so that CRB meetings will start with a 5-minute training session to review what the board needs to do. The next proposal that we passed today was the class text accountability proposal. And this is to ensure the return of textbooks and class text to the library. So all late or outstanding class texts either need to be returned or paid for by the student in order for them to have off-campus privileges. And this doesn't really apply to regular books. It's mostly for class texts. And this is so that the next classes or incoming classes will have enough books for their education and that new books won't have to be purchased. Because right now, the only thing that is really driving people to return their books is that they need it before graduation. But we wanted to have something go into effect earlier than graduation. So taking away off-campus privileges was the way that we thought to do that, but without it impacting learning. And this, it doesn't impact everyone, but it will narrow down the numbers of people the librarians have to individually reach out to. And then on community council, our student activities committee is planning some fun activities. This week we have a costume contest and advisory trick-or-treating during advisory. So that should be fun.
Great, thanks a lot. Any questions or comments? Stephanie?
Can I just ask the question about, so it's just the off-campus privileges, so that really only affects 11th and 12th graders. So how does that work for 9th graders? It just, they won't get caught until 11th grade when they ask for off-campus privilege, or how does that work?
I know the committee that was putting this proposal together, they were trying to think of a way of a privilege that students have. So it wouldn't impact learning in any way. And this was kind of the best they could come up with. And freshmen, when you come into freshman year, you're new to Souhegan, so you won't have overdue books until the end of the year. And some sophomores, about 13% of sophomores do have off-campus privilege. So although that's not very high, it is like a small percent that it would affect. So it would help with getting books back a little bit.
Okay.
And George, I understand you're with us now?
I am here.
All right. Do you have any questions for community council, George?
Not at this point, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Seeing no more, thank you for your update. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda is our policies for a first reading, of which there are numerous. So just for the public's edification, these long list of policies have been first processed by the larger SAU Board Policy Committee, debated and reviewed at the SAU board level, and now have flowed down to the individual boards for their consideration. So rather than go policy by policy, I'd like to just ask by exception if there are any specific policies that any of the board members would like to comment upon for our discussion. And Laura, I know you had indicated you had a list. Okay, Stephanie, which one?
BGAA. And this is just something that dawned on me as we were reading through these policies, and maybe Steve, you can help. Can I just ask my question?
Please. Yeah, hold
Okay.
on, let's get there.
Because he might be able to answer the question for me.
Page 138 in the back.
Yes.
It's not even on, you don't even have to worry about that. My question is, do we have a policy that actually defines who's on the policy committee or how it's selected? Do we need to add that?
The, uh, the, the SAU Policy Committee?
Yeah.
No, it would go here if we had such a thing.
So the question is.
We have a practice that's been forever, literally
Yeah.
since 2007 at least, of 2 members per board. So
Can we
it's,
put that in writing somewhere that this is our practice? I dawned on me as I was reading this. Should have pushed it back at the SAU.
Certainly can, but you don't have to. I mean, it's the practice that you adopt. And each year, the SAU board and other boards elect members to the SAU Policy Committee. So that's an inherent.
I just always think that, I always go by the hit by the bus here. You end up with somebody who's not fit the policy and they come in, they can do whatever they want. And then you could have no one on the policy committee and, superintendent does it himself. You know what I mean? It's just, I'm just wondering, do we need to put it in writing?
all 17 SAU board members have to be hit by the same bus.
Yeah, I
Well,
know.
likely they were on the bus and went over a cliff.
Yeah. But who's running you know what I mean? There's no definition of who's running the committee. So who's going to form the committee? And if they don't want to form it, it's just my thought.
Would it be okay for you if I put a note that we amend this policy next policy season rather than drag it around all the boards at this time?
I think I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you.
Also bring
Yeah,
up
I mean,
2 pages, 2 policies that aren't labeled.
oh, those didn't get corrected? Oh, boy, okay. What page numbers are those?
123 and 124 are BBAB/BDB, am I right? We were talking about this earlier. And then
23.
124. Well, maybe,
Hold on. 123 has a header on it
Okay,
now,
I'm
so has that
looking at-
changed? Do you
I
remember
was
the,
looking at before that.
Do you remember the
this afternoon when
lettering?
it came out. There's no lettering, it's
oh, because we don't know the lettering.
BBAB.
what's before.
Right.
Okay. It looks like they added a header. BBAB.
Oh, did that happen this
BDB.
afternoon?
That was supposed to.
Okay, I honestly just opened this afternoon, the one that came out this afternoon. So,
Yeah, that's one of the corrections in the packet.
okay, so we're-
BBAB, yeah.
okay.
So those errors have been corrected.
All right,
Yay.
done.
Okay.
But it still isn't past the SAU board because they held it back because it didn't have headers.
Oh, we only got 1 reading?
Right.
Really?
And I had a question about it that was never addressed, which I really don't want to bring up tonight. So,
I remember it was without header and confusing once. Was it that way twice, or did it finally get corrected at that SAU process? Does anyone remember?
Which policy?
There were 2, BBAB, and what was the other one?
BDD.
BDD?
DD. They didn't have headers on them at the SAU, and then it was brought back was it the second time? And put the headers, so it's only passed the SAU once? I don't remember if that was what happened or.
I thought they passed the SAU, even though it was the first time there, they'd have been read the first time. I think they were approved by this.
BBAB was passed last meeting.
as the first read or
BDD, all I have is an action back to policy with Laura's comment. The substance of that comment is not in my notes. That's on the October 13th meeting.
the only comment I have about BBAB, I have a comment. If you want to pass it with the headers And my comment is in number 5, it says that the chairperson calls emergency meetings of the board as necessary, but they also call additional meetings of the board as necessary, which I did not see.
Well, emergency meetings are called out by statute specifically as being a responsibility of the board chair.
Right, but they also, it's also additional meetings are called by the chair, which is supported by another policy, which is on page 131. The third paragraph, additional meetings may be scheduled at the call of the chair.
Yeah.
I mean, it's covered by policy BEA, but
Well, it's, the preface of this list is what the chairperson shall do. I mean, it's not a permissive list, so one way to look at it would be, if you were to add something like that, you'd have to also add, you know, some sort of qualifying language, right? An additional meeting isn't a statutory requirement, I guess, is what kind of what Adam was alluding to.
I'm satisfied either way because it's covered in BEA, so I'm okay with it.
And I don't think this, I don't think that either one of those policies is attempting to enumerate all of the rights and powers of each office. These are the roles and the duties, but not necessarily enumerated list of all of the powers of each office holder.
Okay.
So, you know, so we're good with it as is?
Yeah, I'm okay
Okay.
with that. I have 3 other policies or 4.
Is one of them BDD by chance? Or can we figure out what happened with that one? Because it is in here.
It's on here now. It has a header now.
It has the header now. My note says that we were going to go back to policy for Laura's comment. Steve, do you recall what that was about, or if that's on the docket? I know there were 2 or 3 policies that did get kicked back into for committee for a to be scheduled meeting. That is one of them. GBK, I think, was another one, send back to policy. And that was, the reason for that one was the see also other policies that were related. We wanted to make sure we got that correct.
We did not talk about BDD on October 6th.
My notes are from October 13th.
October,
SAU meeting, yeah.
oh. Back again, yeah, I don't know why. I didn't write down why it went. Just wrote down that it went,
Yes.
but perhaps the Sacred Trello board will tell me.
It's only, what, 4 hours meeting or so? Well, at a minimum, it seems like we should pull it out. Whatever the reason was, it was pulled at that level.
Yeah, so
We should pull it from ours.
yeah, we should not, you're right.
Yes, okay.
Uh,
So let's pull BDD.
BDD,
Yes,
boy, David, David.
yes.
Thank you. My ears are not what they used to be.
Okay. Laura, go ahead with your next one.
My next one is BHE,
BHE.
page 141. So I think it's implied that this is official communication, but it doesn't say it, and I would like it to be said, especially since members of the board have no authority alone to begin with. Seems like it would be official electronic communications.
I'm not sure the right to know law makes a distinction. Remember, if a quorum of the board is communicating using any electronic means, official or not, I think
So if someone starts using personal email and still emails the board, it is.
it's still a public record and potentially a meeting. How would you define official, Laura? That's what I'm,
I just feel like I don't feel that it should intrude into my personal life. Or that it would hinder anyone from running from the board because we have policies that are overreaching.
I think the lawsuits over the past 2 decades around the right to know law specifically are to prevent elected officials from using any other electronic means to avoid the right to know law. So I think actually I think your personal rights have been hampered by the fact that you run for an elected seat, which is, you know, I know what you're saying.
No, I agree, there's a responsibility.
If you were to edit it, what would the language say? Do you have a preferred statement somewhere? You said the word official, but I'm not sure where that would even fit in.
Official electronic communications, like if I'm making a statement as a board member, or even if I'm
Oh, I see what you're
sending a communication as a board member, that's one thing, but if I'm talking as a parent, or as a taxpayer, or as a community member, or as a private citizen.
The restriction really is around, and the key line is, for the purpose of discussing district or board business. That line in the 3rd paragraph is the distinction between when you're a parent, when you're a taxpayer, when you're a private citizen, and when you're a board member. So if 3 of you are on your AOL Instant Messenger account from 1998, or 4 of you, I'm sorry, if you dial into AOL and start conversing about board business, then that record should be made public.
And that would be personal email.
Correct. If
Right.
4 of you are discussing how each of your kids are playing on the flag football team at Hampshire Hills, and you need to arrange carpool, then that would not be a communication that needs to be made public. So I think the right to know law knows no bounds in terms of which method you use. But it is restricted to official district and board-related business.
Yep,
There are
sounds
some,
right to me.
there's a board in another town that has 3 family members that are related on the same board. Think how difficult that would be for them. So at Thanksgiving, they're a quorum. That's not that happened in, I think it was Litchfield in the 90s. There's 3 members of the same board of selectmen that were related.
What if it were use of electronic board-related communications instead of official? Because that's how it ends, with board-related communications is what it's relevant to. And I mean, about students, staff, individuals, I could have conversations all day long about my own child. It's still confidential information, has nothing to do with right to know, nothing to do with the board.
So it wouldn't become part of right to know information.
Um,
It would never enter the record as right to know.
So it could be electronic board-related communications by members? Because that's what's distinguishing. It's not necessarily that it's my personal account or a board account. It's the fact the subject matter is board-related.
Correct.
So
I think the sentence covers you because it ends with other forms of board-related communication.
Right.
So use of electronic communications by members of the board shall conform to the same standards as other forms of board-related communication. Meaning, if you consider meeting at Market Basket and 4 of you decide you want to change the school colors at Sauhegan, that's not electronic communication, but it is board-related communication that has to follow the same ethics. So I think that statement does bracket it as board-related communication for the electronic communications. That's how I see it.
Yeah, the interest is the interest that created the right to know law, which is school-related discussions by school elected officials should happen in public. And that's all this is trying to cover, is that. It's not attempting to reach out into other communications you might have about school-related things, but not in an official capacity, like talking to your in-laws about your child's performance or whatever. And it would never, ever be enforced by law enforcement or a court, except in the case of trying to conduct official business out of the eyes of the public. So, and we all run one of the reasons we all have our fancy schmancy SAU39.org email accounts is an attempt to keep all of our official work separate from our personal stuff. Because if things ever go south, and there was a suspicion that one of us was doing official related work through a personal communication account, email, messaging, whatever, all that would be discoverable. And you really don't want that to happen. So you want to be like Caesar's wife here and make sure that all of your communications, school related, happen in that one account, and hope that things never get to the point where someone's going to subpoena your last 10 years of email records, which they have a right to do, and the court, a mean judge would let them do it.
So can I ask a question on that? So this might be what Laura's getting at. Let's say your 10 years worth of cell phone or email was subpoenaed for right to know. Who's actually seeing that private data? And is someone going through and wiping out that private data and only putting forward the pieces of concern? So your public, your private information is not being seen by the public. How does that work?
Well, I think so the SAU39 account would be delivered by the SAU39.
Right, but what about your personal,
My
for someone?
my personal stuff, I don't know. I don't have the experience. They might go to my ISP. I don't use Gmail. I use a separate ISP, and they might just go to the ISP and they'll, hand them a DVD. They still do that? Or thumb drive or whatever. It may be on you. You may be considered your own IT department. It may be on you to produce it all. And Adam actually has some legal training.
So subpoena is different than a right to know request. A right to know request is on you to provide, affirmatively provide those documents. A subpoena, if it goes, it's possible the subpoena in criminal matters usually goes to the ISP or to Gmail or to Facebook or whoever else. In civil matters, it usually goes to you directly, and then your lawyer can argue about what's produced and who looks at it first. And sometimes there's a, what's it called, when a judge reviews it personally, in concert view or something like that. But it's usually done through a process.
So the concern was she was saying her private information might be exposed, most likely not.
And especially if she is willing to testify under oath that she's never used her personal email address for board business.
Yes. Let's, you have a few more that you want to discuss? I was, we're just going into the,
Okay, I have three more. They're all
just
related.
list them. Just boom, boom, boom.
BAAA, JIC, and JICD, and they're all related, having to do with the fact that we have community council involved with the handbook, and these all have the superintendent involved with the handbook. When the original examples from the New Hampshire School Board Association had the code of conduct, which the reason the superintendent in the description, based on the description from the New Hampshire School Board Association, is the reason the superintendent should be in charge of the code of conduct is to have consistency, which makes sense to me. However, the handbook is something unique to have the contents be part of community council involvement. And I felt like, as written, that these three policies did not reflect our unique arrangement. And it conflicts with our other policy that's already in place, which establishes community council. So if we pass these three policies, we would be in conflict with our current policy. And I brought this up at policy committee, but most of the policy committee members are from other districts.
I'll take a stab at a response and see where the discussion goes. Big student handbook is this big, and there are minimum standards that we direct that are in the student handbook that are smaller than the student handbook. So we have policies that require certain minimum things be put into somewhere. It's nice in the student handbook. Sometimes we'll call it out as a student handbook, but then there's room for this community council or the principal or the administrative procedure process to add things to the student handbook to make it a larger document that includes more than just the minimum required by our policy. So, it would be impossible, or at least it would be against policy, for there to be a student handbook that doesn't include the minimums that are required. And I can't remember the lettering, but there are some policies that do require certain elements be in the student handbook, like disciplinary procedures is one of them. And so I don't think that what this is saying is that the student handbooks are administrative procedures. And when I hear you, your beef with that is that there's student handbook has parts of it that are need to be formally adopted by the board. Is that right?
Right, we have,
Regardless of what
delegated-
administration wants and regardless of what community council wants. I mean,
Right.
we set that's where our power lies.
right,
And codes of conduct, and as long as they're, consistent with the law, then bang. And we do have a policy that says that codes of conduct shall be communicated in the student handbook. But that's not to say that the student handbook couldn't be bigger than just that.
the policy committee went in and took the New Hampshire School Board Association draft or sample policy, and everywhere it said code of conduct, they switched it to handbook, which works for the other districts, but for our district creates a conflict. So if we pass the policies as written, we're creating a conflict between the Sohegan Constitution, which creates community council and gives them certain elements of responsibility in our school. And then, so
Well, finish the thought. Where's the conflict?
the conflict is here, you're giving all these three policies handed over to administration when we've already handed it to community council.
Go ahead, Steve.
So when we discussed this in the policy committee, so John and I were this board's representatives on the policy committee. And we agreed that the language worked for Sohegan. I believe Christine was the administration representative for those discussions. She also agreed that it worked for the Sohegan case. We discussed it extensively at your prompt and explained the situation to the other policy committee members who are not from the Sohegan board. And they all grasped that the explanation that John and I and Christine gave, that it worked just as well at Sohegan as it did in the other districts without being the conflict that you suggested is. So I'm just going to assert that I think your interpretation of this is wrong, and where these policies, in fact, accomplish what we want to accomplish and don't cause any conflict with with the law or with our practice. I think part of the confusion here starts with when the School Board Association drafted the model, they said, like a good physicist might, let's assume there's a code of conduct, and then we will write the policy assuming it exists and include the words code of conduct everywhere. And in their notes, they even said, you may not have a code of conduct, change it to be what you have. And what we have is a student handbook, which, as John said, includes conduct expectations for students, but is not just conduct expectations for students. So that's why we use the student handbook language everywhere, because it is exactly correct for our circumstance. Whatever the policy says a student or a staff member has to do, they go to the student handbook to see it. That's true. Now, community council could add other things to the student handbook, but they're not code of conduct issues. They're how you get a lock for your locker. Totally irrelevant. So that's where we are. And I think that I'll stand by this policy as written.
Thanks, Steve. That checks with my memory of our discussion in policy committee. Stephanie?
So Laura, I think this is how I read it. The JIC, which is talks about student handbook, JICD talks about discipline. I don't see where that's necessary conflict. I mean, discipline is not I mean, the way, what's written in there
Mhm.
doesn't really, I would say, if you're, if you're worried about violating community council, like the FJ board knows that doesn't violate what they're doing, because this is really about the administrative procedure of it. So I think JICD is okay, because then the handbook goes in, talks about the other appeals and things like that. So our handbook goes into more depth. JIC just talks about what's in the handbook sort of thing. So I don't think that really violates it. The one question I do have though, Steve, on BAAA, under contents of board policy and administrative procedure, so the policies of the board.
Sorry, what page?
Sorry, it's
I brought the
page-
wrong technology for this discussion.
Yeah, page 120.
Thank you.
The first sentence under contents of board policy and administrative procedure says the policies of the board are formally adopted by the board. Job descriptions, student handbooks, employee handbooks are administrative procedures. Who owns the handbook in Sohegan? Does community council, quote unquote, own the handbook? And this is that one piece that might.
I believe that the principal owns the handbook, and input comes from many places. It comes from board policies, community council provides, I would imagine, a ton of stuff that goes in there,
Yeah.
but,
For some reason I thought.
but
community council-
they're not printing it. He is.
I know they didn't print it, but did they, I'm gonna say,
Yeah, right. No, I believe that there is no student handbook functional infrastructure within community council.
that's what I was wondering.
They,
So-
they pass proposals and they wind up in the student handbook, and that's, as far as I know, the extent of their involvement.
Okay.
I mean, and furthermore to the point, I think too, JIC, it says, expectations for student conduct and standards of behavior. That's a code of conduct shall be communicated through written board policies as well as district rules. Period. We don't say what formatting needs to take. We suggest that they should be included in a student handbook for each school, and that is in fact the practice. But it's not so heavy-handed at this level to say that it has to be in a student handbook. It could be but it needs to be in a written communication without exception. So that information is required by policy to be communicated to students and their families. It just so happens that we do that in a nice package that we call the student handbook. That
Right.
includes lots of other things as well as conduct and standards of behavior and penalties for violating those standards vis-a-vis JICD. So I don't see the like Steve, I don't really see the conflict because there's room in there for each authority to add information to have a comprehensive handbook that's good for the students. I will also say that there's nothing prohibiting us from taking over pieces of that if we felt so compelled to dictate what the locker assignment policy should be. I mean, we could do that, right? There's a lot of things that we don't interfere with because that's not really our impetus. There's no need for that kind of thing.
Those are all my comments.
All right. Thanks, Laura. That's good debate. So that was BDD is pulled. We're not even gonna mess with that one. BGAA, Stephanie raised, is we're going to vote to adopt it, but you're going to have a note to put it back in the queue for next season or at some point down the line.
Any policy worth doing is worth doing 10 times.
BBAB we clarified the comments about emergency meetings versus additional meetings. BHE, we discussed official communications. And then the BAA, JIC, JICD regarding codes of conduct in the handbook. Because those were called out, should we vote on those separately? That's what I'm thinking.
It's only a few handful.
Okay. Okay, well, let's start at the top then. I'll make a motion to accept policy BGAA as written.
John, this is just the first reading, so it's just to move it to second reading.
Thanks, Steve. Make a policy to move BGAA as written to a second reading. Each one of the ones we discussed, and then the rest will. I don't want anyone who is not okay with it to have to vote no against the whole lot because of some comments, right? So we'll isolate these and then we'll vote on the rest to move them, is my idea.
I'll second that motion.
Thanks, Steve. George is still with us? Okay, roll call vote. Steve?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, no.
All right, that motion passes. I'll make a motion to move policy BAB to a second reading.
I'll do it to make it easy for, yes, yeah, second,
Roll call vote. Steve?
yes.
George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, yes.
I'll make a motion to move policy BHE to a second reading.
I'll second,
Roll call vote. Steve?
yes.
George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, yes.
I'll make a motion to move policies BAA, JIC, and JICD for a second reading.
Second,
George, or Steve?
yes.
For the voice call. George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, no.
And I'll move to table BDD.
I'll second. Roll call.
Yes.
George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, yes.
All right, very good. And then I'll make the motion to move all remaining policies on the first read to a second read.
I'll second,
Roll call. Steve?
yes.
George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, yes.
All right, great. Thanks, guys. All right, next we have a couple of policies that Laura's been working on with others and really doing a lot of yeoman's work here. One of these policies is a policy that we have existing that is one sentence long. Do you know what page this is in the packet offhand by chance?
Very end.
164.
Oh, the very end. Good. Just want to read it for the public's edification. So our existing policy for staff-student relation is one sentence long that reads, students and staff members will treat one another with courtesy, kindness, and respect in the process of advancing each other's knowledge and development. That was adopted at the inception of the school in the first year of May 1992. It's nothing wrong with the sentence. It's a lovely sentence. But we've seen some challenges in other places with student-staff relations. And Laura has done a lot of work to try to bring us current and to protect both the students and the staff in how they interact with each other, has come up with a policy to do that. And with that introduction, I'd like her to brief us on the problem she's trying to solve, and the process that she's gone through to get us this drafts for our discussion tonight.
The problem is well, not necessarily a problem, but an objective is to protect student safety, protect the staff safety, and increase traceability of communications between student and staff. And by staff, to expand that to all the employees, including our coaches and our designated volunteers, our advisors, and even the SAU 39 district employees that work with Souhegan students in our district. So it's previously credentialed staff members, and it expands some boundaries. It also restricts some boundaries. The only main thing in here that restricts it more than you might see is making the distinction of staff shall not use private personal communications with students. For example, private emails, text messages, chat blogs, letters to students, or social media responses. Exceptions can be made for emergencies and bulk text notification. So by private personal communications, we still have Google email, we have Google Classroom, we have other, even in this policy, we have other communication outlets that are satisfied and approved by the SAU and satisfy the data privacy and governance plan of our SAU and the New Hampshire DOE privacy guidelines. So we do have means of communications. It's just limiting. Other school districts are already, they have administrative procedures, is my understanding. Some have been from calling them directly, and others from other people from informing me of the limitation and restriction of text messages between staff and employees and students. I realize that for a student, this might provide some inconvenience. It might even provide inconvenience for the staff, but I feel like to protect our district from potential liability, lawsuits, as well as safety of the students and staff, that this is a measure that we should consider.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have built this, sought feedback from entities including the New Hampshire School Board Association, as well as our Ppc teachers group. And this is the culmination of that work to date.
It is, and I appreciated the opportunity to present to the PPC. I don't think they wanted anything in writing that gave them restrictions. But I feel like as a board, this is a move that we should make, and it's in our discretion. And it's somewhat, I feel to some extent, we have a responsibility to our students and our taxpayers and our community to protect ourselves.
All right, thanks, Laura. Steve, and you, because Christy's been out of it, you've attended the last couple of PPC meetings, and they've discussed this draft.
I had a domestic emergency last week and was unable to attend PPC, and I believe Christy had a personal issue, family issue to deal with, and so she missed it.
Right.
But
Stephanie was there?
Yeah.
So maybe you could enlighten us on the,
Yeah, so presenting to the PPC, so some of the things they really appreciate was that they are in full agreement of traceability. So communication with students needs to be traceable. Multiple of the teachers that were there stated that they never text students, and others were like, yeah, do we want that? But then they were all going, but we have Google, we have our Gmail, we have Google Classroom, we have Google Chat, we have ways to communicate with students. They were like, okay. What it is that they understand that certified staff already fall under this code of conduct, code of ethics. They do like the idea that this then expands it to cover all staff. So they are absolutely in agreement. One thing that their concern was, if it's already in code of ethics, code of conduct is written out there, do we need to rewrite some of the stuff in here? That was their concern. Or can we just say, if we reference the code of conduct, code of ethics, it's already in there. That's where so I don't think it was necessarily the restricting. I think it was the fact that some of it's being rewritten into a policy versus just reference that it exists. And then go ahead and make a comment around direct communication and traceability and leave it at that. That's where came out of that.
I was at that meeting for a while, but had to leave. Did they end up taking a vote?
Yeah, but so the piece, so they took a vote. The vote they were very clear on was not to say they don't want the policy. They want a policy. They don't necessarily like the draft that is here today. That was the vote, and they did vote that draft down. But they're in favor of a policy, and they're very, very clear in that.
So I would say if the concern is it's redundant with the code of conduct, if I had been there, I would have argued it's not. It supplements it in a way that seems to be agreeable to everyone.
And I think we need to show that to them and they'll understand. That's where we came down to. And I think they didn't understand that the current GBK is rescinded, right? So this kind of replaces some of that information that was in there that's no longer there. And they asked for that to kind of be laid out. Like,
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
So
GBK technically isn't rescinded yet. It's on the path.
it's on the path
on
to
the
be,
path to
yes. So I think if we show the pieces that
Yeah.
what's taken out kind of shows up.
Yeah, everything that's in the current GBK
That's,
will wind up someplace else.
and I think they need to understand that because they had no idea GBK was in process of being rescinded.
Yeah, I'd make two recommendations for the board. First, I think it would be important for a representative from PPC to speak to the board directly about the PPC's position on the policy, because all of the G policies affect our PPC, and we are the largest non-union shop in New Hampshire by far. And I would want to make sure that their consideration is taken into account, especially given that they voted it down, at least in terms of form, not necessarily purpose. The second would be, I'm very much in favor of the code of conduct being applied to all staff members, not just certified staff members, and I'm not sure we have a hook to do that in our current policies yet, so I'm a big fan of that. But I would suggest, because this has been included with some input from the New Hampshire School Board Association and some input from board and some input from PPC, that a formal legal review be done by one of our attorneys to make sure that we've covered all the bases. Seeing Laura shake her head, what I appreciate.
That would be terrific.
So I would recommend that we move down that pathway as well.
And this, I took out a couple things trying to satisfy the PPC,
Oh, since the PPC, this is different?
but they still weren't satisfied. I think, I don't know if they read policies a lot, like yeah, I think some of the structure struck them off guard. They weren't familiar with some of the structure. But anyway, so I changed some of the structure for them. I'm happy to give you both copies. And just, if that makes it easier.
Great.
Just a bit of PPC policy history. probably about 5 years ago, we read every G policy in PPC line by line out loud. Since then, all but one member of PPC from the staff has turned over. So at one point, they all knew them by heart, if they're good memorizers. But now only one of the members lived through that experience. So you're right, they probably are, the newer members are probably quite taken aback by the intricacies of policy language.
John, I wouldn't mind having a discussion on what the other board members think of restrictions.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's worthy. I mean, being put in this, this agenda for now is for all of us to have awareness of what's been going on behind the scenes, what Laura's been doing, what Steve and Stephanie have been shepherding through and watching at the PPC, et cetera. So, and I appreciate your suggestions for formal legal review at this point. That's a good idea. Yes, provide the red line so he can see what was and then what is this. It'd be great. And as far as I read, I mean, this policy's intent for student staff interaction is to keep those interactions in a traceable format, one that the district can review without any third-party interference or delay. So right now we have a Gmail platform, for example. Who knows in 5 years, but what the platform is doesn't really matter. And so instead of doing private texting, for example, through your phone number, you would do it through Google Chat, which is effectively the same function. Might require some student and some staffs to download apps, but it won't cost them any money. They already have accounts, and downloading apps isn't a new thing for anybody these days. And then that way, coaches could communicate with teams, could reach out to individual students about you know, where they need to be and when they need to be there, and so on and so forth, which is what a lot of text communication is doing now. Not just coaches, but advisors and teachers and students and staff and just all of it, all of the buzz. And that this principally is getting it into a format that can be reviewed. And for that, I think it's a noble effort. I think that's the traceability piece that the PPC is in favor of. So that has my full support as well. And then to answer your question, the restrictions. So you have to, I think, have restrictions. It can't be a policy where you say a lot of permissive language like, we hope and wish you probably should not use anything private. I think there has to be a requirement. Otherwise, this isn't providing the protection it aims to provide. Steve.
So I just want to say, the original policy from 1992, all one sentence of it, combined with careful hiring and good administrative supervision, has led us to 30 years of trouble-free operations. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't, Tim or George want to say anything?
Shaking his head. George, do you have a comment on this student staff interaction policy?
I'm sorry, I can barely hear some of you. I think you're asking me about my opinion on the policy itself.
Yes.
Thank you. I think I'm okay with the way it currently structured right now. However, Laura has brought up some valid points I think are worth discussion, but you know, at this point, I could be convinced either way. So that's where I stand right now.
Thanks, George.
Okay, so Steve, I want to say yes. I love the fact that we've had a history, a clean history as far as, right? But times change, and with a lot of, almost every kid holding one of these things in their hands and things not being traceable, I think we need to structure something that says there is a traceable communication. That's where I stand on that.
Oh, I wasn't saying we would vote no on this. I'm just
Yeah.
saying what we had worked
We-
perfectly fine.
We've,
Right.
right?
Right.
Unfortunately, I know around school districts that have,
The big
more things going on.
innovation here is, over the prior policy, is not what is said, but some restrictions on how it's said.
Yeah, just a second, Laura. I think that's right. And I mean, there's already restrictions on what is said. There's a code of ethics and a code of conduct, et cetera. But it's been abused by other districts in our state and other places, that power differential. And I think Laura's right that by not having a strong policy that has restrictions in it, that there is, this will help protect us to the extent we're protectable in such situations. So learning from the bad behaviors of others and being a little more proactive is probably a prudent move, in my opinion. Yes, Laura.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that this is mostly in a response of other school districts have beefed up this policy or these types of policies after they have a problem. And I think we'd be better serving our students and our staff to create some guidelines before, because that's where I started. My first outline was from other districts that had to rewrite theirs. And I don't want to name all the towns, even in just New Hampshire, that have had problems, and not in the distant past either. Pam?
Yes, Pam, go ahead.
So what's the action item?
The action item is, seems to me to be to authorize, we can, just for confidence, authorize Adam to perform the legal review that he suggested. And that will extend an invitation to PPC. Hopefully they can come or send a representative to our next meeting and have their comment at our next meeting.
Then I'll make that motion.
And a legal review.
Yeah, the legal review is step one.
Okay.
I'll second.
Hmm?
You'll send me the
Okay, I'll second Pim's motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Roll call vote.
Yes,
George?
George, yes.
Glover, yes.
Ron, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Thanks, Pim. Next one is another policy that Laura, for similar reasons. This was not one that we had existing, and want to give us a brief history of the purpose and the process for where we are now.
This policy is GBEBD, staff use of social media. We have no policy on this right now. We have KD and KDC and KDR, which covers use of district social media accounts. But this is the staff use of social media primarily between themselves and students. The restrictions here were taken straight from RSAs. And this has gone also through the review of the New Hampshire School Board Association that liked it very much. They agreed that it aligned well with the RSAs.
And do we have any feedback, Stephanie or Steve, from PPC on this one?
no, this one didn't go to PPC. It went to the SAU Policy Committee first. And
Okay.
You may remember, John, we talked about it briefly at the end of the last SAU policy meeting. So it's been making its way slowly through that. theory being it is applicable to all districts.
Yes, right. Well, even the other one should be as well. I mean, seems
It appears to be less of an issue in the.
less of an issue. Middle school, half an issue. Elementary school, unlikely to be an issue.
So GBEBD, the use of social media, right now we have, as we said, the code of conduct applies to credential holders, credentialed employees, and this is more expansion, it expands to all district employees for the Sohegan district, and then the SAU district when they're interacting with our students. So it like the, some of these, like the not engaging or following social media accounts, that's straight for credentialed. So we would be expanding it to all employees and not just credentialed employees, which are the faculty and the administration and others.
Right. Adam, do you have a comment on this?
I do not. I actually assumed that we made the last motion to pertain to both policies, so I didn't realize we were going to go over this policy as well, but I think the same.
Okay.
The
That would
same
be great.
thing probably.
Yeah, I
applies.
was
Thank
going to
you.
say, and at what point should we formally present this to PPC? Should we do that now? So when PPC comes to us, but they may not have enough time, not having had this one yet.
I
for
sent the
comment.
PPC both policies.
Oh, you did?
They just had feedback on the one.
Oh, okay.
So-
Well, then maybe we can,
Yeah, they were also waiting for it to pop out of the SAU Policy Committee.
okay.
So we're sort of advancing this quicker here than the mainstream process. It would work, I'd probably work just as well to get a lawyerified version of this, and that is probably closer to what we ultimately intend to adopt, and send that off to PPC rather than, or see, early in the process, you can do more language negotiations. Later in the process, it's more like more defined, this is happening, what are your comments on it? So we can consider them.
Okay, so action is then only to submit to legal review at this point.
Yeah, so it depends, Mr. Chair, on how you want to consider this. You want to consider this the first reading, or do you want to consider it pre-first reading?
I want both for pre-first reading. I think we're not there yet to have a proper first reading
All right, so then, yeah, so when we get back from the lawyers, we can send it to PPC and
and proceed.
proceed.
Okay. I like that. All right, Pim, you want to make your famous motion? To send it to legal. I'll second your motion. Roll call vote. Steve,
Yes.
George,
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Data security discussion. Is that you, Adam? Was that?
Are we still keeping the data? Is it still keeping the data? So wherever the access to it.
Yeah, forgive me, I did not prepare for this. I figured this really was just a discussion and not an update from me, so my apologies. But the Deladeo software is still not doing that extra logging. But it's our IT staff that has access to all of the logs and access to all of the records. It's available for my inspection if need be. or a building administrator if they need to, but we're still not doing any of the advanced logging that they have, and we're still investigating other potential solutions. So I'm just not that thrilled with the optics of that software. I don't have anything more for tonight. I apologize.
No problem. Oh, go ahead.
Do you know what the status is on your search for perhaps an alternative, or that would meet the same ends for your goals?
Yeah, I don't. I've really asked Brian Miller to do that work. It's not been our highest priority because getting the school year started has been the higher priority. Frankly, we have a filter that works, that's compliant, that's lawful and legal and all of that. So I'll provide an update when we get further down the line. I'm just not ready to say what that timeline is yet, though.
Thank you.
All right, fair point. Moving on, we'll enter our, oh, you had another question? Okay. Into our budget elements. Yes. But before we do that, we're going to move into non-public session for a bit to discuss a relevant matter. So I'll make a motion to go into yes.
Would you like to move the public input before we go into non-public?
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Public input number 2. If anyone from the public would like to speak, now is a good time. Seeing none. Thanks for that. I'll make a motion to go into non-public.
Can I ask what letter?
Adam, the lettering.
-A:3, subsection 2A and C.
Thank you. Am I seconding the motion or am I voting?
I made the motion, so.
I'll second it and say yes.
George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Taylor, yes.
We will actually need the room, I think, is George. So I might need to ask members of the public to step out temporarily. Dana, you stay, however. Not that I've ever made this mistake before, but I'm going to stop the live stream.
I'm going to make a motion when you're ready to change.
Okay.
I move that the board
Yeah.
approve the superintendent's request to offer early retirement incentives to professional staff of $80,000.
Roll call vote, Steve?
Yes.
George?
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Yes.
Taylor, yes.
Great, thanks, guys. And just for the benefit of the recording and the public, a motion was made coming out of non-public to seal the minutes to protect the reputation of a person who is not a board member. That motion passed unanimously. George abstained? No.
You voted for the seal.
Yes, right, that's right, that's right. Okay. Amy Facey, Business Administrator, you are on the queue now. Okay, fantastic.
And just as a reference for this evening, so this is your first foray into the budget, and so we expect this to be about a 15 to 20-minute conversation topic. There's hours of depth that will be provided over the course of the next several months, but today is our first foray, and so Mike has got a 10 or 12-minute introduction to that. Mike. Turn your mic on if you wouldn't mind.
So before we get into presenting the slide deck, I want to have Galen and Dana help me out in a moment. I just want to read some remarks that we put together, as this is our first time putting together a budget presentation that I can say, in my time as principal of Sauhegan, is something that I'm knowledgeable of. I have a good handle of the process that we went through internally and in partnership with the SAU. So this presentation is a step in a series of events that will capitalize on what Sauhegan has traditionally been known for, while also making the necessary changes that our students deserve in these challenging and changing times. We think that our analysis and this resulting plan maintains and improves on our current level of student excellence, while also renewing our commitment to the professionalism and growth to our staff and re-energizing the tenets set forth in the Sauhegan 6. Since my arrival, we have committed to examining the way we do things at Sauhegan. This includes the systems and processes that guide us, our instructional practices, and the student learning outcomes that we see through a variety of measures. The efforts of our faculty and staff so far to engage in collective inquiry and to welcome thoughtful yet challenging change are commendable. I believe that Sauhegan will rise to the level of our vision and the strategic vision of SAU 39, only if the systems and culture serve as a strong foundation for this direction. We must hold on to the values from the past that are important, stay grounded in the present, and lead and educate students for the future. What you'll see and hear tonight and in future meeting is our plan to operationalize the building of this foundation and culture. This effort is part of our commitment to the continual growth and improvement that is necessary in order to meet the evolving needs of young people, and is based on the virtue of collaboration. That is, believing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We'll move ahead in looking for affinities and natural connections between ideas, people, and services, with the intent of integrating deeply rather than continuing broadly. We must narrow our energies in order to provide the educational experience that is valued both by our Sauhegan community and the community at large. Depth over breadth was a founding principle of the CES and Sauhegan High School, and over time, we think we have strayed from that ideal. True change requires changing our thinking. What worked well at one time is now no longer suited to that purpose, and the goals themselves have quietly shifted. This requires us to adapt and to change, which is especially difficult for those who have continued to do the good work that once was groundbreaking and lauded and previously exactly right. Change is challenging, and change is also exciting, and we are certainly excited about the work ahead in the next 2 or 3 years as we continue to provide the strategic vision of SAU 39. And so, besides the graduation remarks, this is about the first time I put things down in paper as a principal. I don't do it very often, but I wanted to do that here with you guys tonight because I wanted to be really clear like what we're about in this first like real budget cycle. And I really appreciate Galen and Dana, the steering committee members, and all the people that worked internally so hard to kind of transition this budget from someone who has managed it for many, many, many years and kind of left it to us as we transition, as part of a school, that has operated kind of in a silo to as we kind of partner with SAU 39. And so what we have here is a presentation and you'll see, oh, I got to do it that way. It might not be working there. Can you move it by itself? All right, so for us, if you can look up here, there's the strategic vision of the district, and you'll get this, and you'll get some of my remarks here if later that you can have, but you'll see the strategic vision and what we're doing underneath that there. And then you'll see how we're on the right aligning our priorities to that. And it's really important that as we develop this staffing plan, we develop this budget, which is our portion of the presentation tonight, it was done really in a thoughtful respectful manner of students and teachers, interests of the district, interests of the school board. And we're really proud of the work that's been done, and we think it's honest. It's an honest effort to meet all the perspectives of the stakeholders that are on our dashboard as building level administrators. So next, Steve, let's see if I can get it. So just these are some demographics, real simple demographics for us. You can see our percentage of special ed students. You can see free and reduced lunch. You can see the current population of the school. Real simple there. Oh. Yeah, so we're back in action here. So here's projected enrollments over the course of the next little bit. All right, and it's simple. There's disclaimers on here. I feel like I have to have disclaimers because I want to be clear where we're getting the information. You might be getting it somewhere else. This is where we're getting it. And this is us being honest. What we did is Galen just rolled it over. Simply rolled it over. What we have in Power School. And so you have that. Then, as we get into the next little bit of our presentation, these are just a glossary, and when you get this, just kind of keep these things in mind. These are the language that we use as educators to build a master schedule, to take a look at staffing, to make sure that we are doing things as honestly and accurately as possible. And at the end of the day, this is what it is. When I told Adam, we're going to be really transparent. We're going to be really honest about it. And this is what's happening. And if people are really excited about what's happening, yes. If they have questions about it, let's have questions. If they're, status quo, continue on, let's go. Like, we'll be fine with, having any conversation because we know everyone's intent is really pure and true, and the school has evolved to where, the way it is. And I think we don't want people to be speculating about what's happening. So the first slide, let me explain this. I'll take a look at, Steve, this is a weird clicker, Steve Chamberlain. So, all right, we'll just use 9. We have 9 full-time teachers. 21, 22, this is what we have in the building. Those 9 average 4.5 sections. That's in accordance with the Ppc agreement. Their academic load, and I want to be really clear, people ask me, how many students do teachers have? The average, when you take, what we have is our average English teacher in their academic classes, their total student load is 81 students. You take their average advisory, that's where you get the semester 1 student load. And then we have all the departments here. We did the same thing for second semester. And that's how we came up with that number, and that's how schools talk about FTEs and student load right there. Let's see if we get it right here. All right. Now this is a little bit more in depth, and Galen, I might have you go to the microphone and kind of walk through this because you put this together, and I think you can explain it as well as I can.
So the slide before was really looking at the averages. This slide looks at the totals across the courses. So again, you see the first column with the FTEs. The first section is, this represents full year courses. So what this course count is actually like a unique course. So not if, English ethics has 3 sections. That doesn't count as a 3, that counts as a 1. So that's really the number of unique English classes. And then the section count is the number of sections. So that's why the section number is so much greater than the course count, as you have a certain number of courses with multiple sections. And then that's your student count. Obviously, you see in cases like English, social studies, science, that's obviously more than our current enrollment because there are students that take more than 1 English class, more than 1 science, social studies, etc. And then the semester 1 and semester 2 sections, it's the same thing. It's just looking at, those are courses that only run semester 1, courses that only run semester 2. One thing just to keep in mind, both on the other slide and on this slide, semester 2, obviously some of those numbers can change if students need academic support or decide they want to take another elective. Second semester, obviously those enrollments haven't yet occurred.
And so one of the simplest ways I was explaining this to another administrator is, of the 11 unique English courses we offer, we have 38 sections of those throughout our building. All right, conversation around learning specialists. Of the 15%, we have 113 students. It averaged out with our learning specialists. We have 11 and a half learning specialists, and their average caseload is that. But they have other responsibilities. The model that Sauhegan High School uses is a bit unique, and we have co-taught classes, we have academic support, and advisory responsibilities, in addition to managing student caseloads. This is the student service. These are our counselors. We currently have 4.85 counselors. Their average is 183.6. American School Counselor recommends no greater than 250. We have a director that has a small caseload that is not included in the average.
Included in the FTEs, but not the average, or not included in both?
Correct. It is substantially different. Okay, this is historical. This is a historical staffing of this. And so what you'll see here is, right now, currently we're 9.0. At one point they had 9.75 in 1920. And this is based off of this is the challenging thing. I got in lots of conversations with different people, how you build this, and it's built off student demand and what you need to offer. So it's subject to change kind of throughout the year. We can anticipate this right now, but if all of a sudden, like, we build a program of studies and kids want to take different things and we want to offer different things, a lot of times I'll say, Steve, Adam, Amy, Amina, can we change how many English teachers we have? Because we need more science teachers, but not go over all the FTE. We will do that. That's budgeted for. So this is kind of subject to change, and that's how you manage the attrition. That's how you manage student demand, is you get a number that's approved on in like October and voted on, eventually in March, but you start to build the schedule with kids in January and February. So that's that staffing history. We do have a kind of like an open area that we have not, based as of today, figure out exactly what we're going to do with the World Language Department. And it's, that's an open question. So that's our number right there, plus what we have. We currently have 6. We don't see major shifts or changes. We just have not finalized that quite yet. Now, this is kind of on some of the support side and the learning specialist side. Same thing with the FTEs historically. And then as you kind of get into some changes between 21 and 22 and what's projected, and what you'll see in here is there is some changes, significant changes, based on some transition that's happening from AMS to the high school, and in certain programs such as the transition program, and some of the ways the needs that we need to meet are the students that are at Sauhegan High School. And so you get that number there where we're at right now. Okay, so what we want to talk a little bit about is kind of our efforts on as we kind of expand the reorganization. And we had this conversation a little bit last year about planning out about domain leaders and how we're moving forward, and planning for the future. What I'd like to do is have Dana Curran come up and kind of talk through what this slide means as it affects the next, little bit of the presentation. It's on, it was on. Got to hold it. Very good.
Am I good now? Okay. So I just want to go back real briefly and touch on something that Mike said a couple slides ago about how the plan that we're putting together for you today is meeting the needs of our kids and supporting our teachers, maintaining our flexibility, and doing it in a really caring way through our organic retirements and not through involuntary reduction. So I just want to make that really clear to anybody who's watching or listening. I'm excited to present this to you today. I don't think that this is the first time the board has heard about distributed leadership. Within a school, distributed leadership often takes the form of an instructional leadership team, which represents the larger school community. And each team member is involved because of their area expertise in a specific content and pedagogy. Distributed leadership is not about dividing tasks and responsibilities among individuals, but rather it's concerned with interactions between individuals, the leaders and those that they lead, to drive instructional improvement and improve student learning outcomes through the development of high quality teaching and a culture where all students can thrive. So that's the underpinning, that's the research, and that's what's behind this. And you can see what we've done here is explain and highlight how this plan emboldens the strategic vision, right? So this distributed leadership, domain leadership model enables our implementation of personalized success plans. It focuses on and elevates teaching and learning, which we are striving to make the most prominent work in our building for both students and staff. The domain leaders serve as an anchoring adult who guides, and it also helps us deepen relationships and augments our decision-making because we have better alignment directly where the rubber meets the road with students in class. We have strengthened and informed voice from the front lines working with our kids and a really representative and transparent leadership. So I won't read the rest of the slide to you, but I hope that you enjoy reading it.
So the point that matters most to me is, well, we want to be the area that we focus our energies is providing the best overall educational experience for students and their families. We firmly believe that by focusing on the teaching and learning and supporting of teachers and coaching of teachers to provide that on a daily basis with their students is where we want to put our energies. All those other things are secondary, and that could be a shift. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic of a shift, but this is where we are moving towards and feel strongly about, because we feel like that will transfer into a better experience for students. So that's currently what we have. This is our leadership structure that we currently have, as we kind of talked about last year. What we're recommending moving forward for 22-23 is this, and I want to walk through this, and Adam, please chime in about any of the areas that you feel like we need to, or Steve. So what we're presenting and suggesting at the building level to the school board is we keep the humanities and leader at the high school, but we split out the STEM from math to science, but push down the math domain leaders to grades 5 through 12 to align and vertically and philosophically from Sauhegan to AMS in the area of math, as that's an area of focus for the district. We would like to add a world language domain leader, as indicated as part of our plan last year, at the 9-12 level. The area that's kind of in orange, and it's an outliers because we first talked about the performing arts director at the K-12 level the other day. It's not really close to finalized, as far as our school board goes or the joint school board goes, but we'd be not honest if we didn't say this was on the back of our mind as we plan for it. All right. Moving forward into the following year, 23, 24, you see it stays the same as far as positions, but where they push down into is we start to get into AMS to continue that vertical alignment and distributed leadership with there. Yeah, you can chime in whenever you want.
You will
Does
notice,
everyone know Dana Curran? She's the dean of faculty. You don't ask for permission, just jump in.
you will notice maybe that we have not separated out the area of humanities, and that is intentional for us at Sauhegan because over the summer, the work that we've done to integrate our humanities program to really make it a cohesive unit between English and social studies is really important work. And we want to continue to lean our efforts into that. That's not a fully realized model at AMS at this point, and it wouldn't be really fair for us to adjudicate to them something that is currently just for us. So you can see that that's why that's left as a humanities domain leader, and more thoughtful discussion needs to be had about the direction in which we want to take that.
So another way of presenting this, as we kind of forecast out, and you see where, at this point in time, our position is this is kind of where we're at, and this is where we want to get to by FY26, centered on the teaching and learning and helping people get better at their craft in service of students. So in summary, what we think this portion of our presentation, allows us to do at Sauhegan High School and moving forward, as we partner with AMS, is to meet the needs of students, provide as much support as for our faculty and staff as they navigate the current times, plus also this endeavor to get better, focus on instruction, and then gives us flexibility within it. And that's one of the drives of being an administrator at Sauhegan High School. There is some flexibility. There is some talented teachers and staff, and you have a lot of motivated students that want to come here, and they're willing. And we feel like this model helps us meet the needs of more students and more families, and we're really excited about it, and it's connected to the SAU 39 vision. So there's going to be far more conversation on this over the course of the next few weeks and really months. But we just wanted to make sure we presented here as concisely as possible and as clearly as possible and mostly as honest as possible. And so this is where we're at as of the 25th of October. So appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, if I could chime in, this has my full and complete support. We've had these conversations over the past year and specifically over this past summer and then through this fall about where our SAU or our school district needs to go. And the focus that Mike and Dana have laid out is exactly what we need. If you are like me, you're probably wondering, okay, but what does it cost? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy Facey to present our budget.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it.
Unless there's some questions.
The only question I have, I love the idea of the domain leaders when we're starting to say we're looking over more than just what's happening in Sauhegan, because we're always looking at what is coming into Sauhegan in order to, so that's awesome. And I'd be interested to see what happens in the budget. If we start having these domain leaders that are being pulled out of teaching classes, are we going to have to increase our staffing to cover those classes not being taught by the business? Or is that something coming down?
So that is one reason I was trying to cut to the budget so you see the bottom line. But eventually, I'm dedicated to these positions teaching as long as possible because it gives them credibility for their the other teachers in their departments. It also has a budgetary impact that I think can't be ignored. And we don't want to have a fleet of administrators that aren't also grounded in the teaching in the classroom. So we're going to learn as we go. Although I say that, despite having experience in Wyndham doing something exactly similar that we designed there in the last few years I was there, that's continued to this day. So I do have some knowledge of how this works. But we're going to be iterating each year, coming back, having conversations about how it went, how it didn't, and what changes we think we need to make. But we wanted, in fairness, we didn't want to just give you next year. We wanted to give you our vision of what the future will be. It's a long way of saying, I'm not sure. Laura, you have?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
I was in my headspace, absorbing.
It's a lot.
I was letting you think there for a minute, yeah.
So my biggest question is science at the high school. Like, if you're hiring a science domain leader, do we then have to split it with AMS and make sure someone satisfies both? And or will they be on our payroll? Will we get to decide who that person is and what their objectives are? I just feel like science at the middle school is much different than science at the high school. And it's okay if the quality of the high school flows down into the middle school. I have a problem with trying to find a science domain leader that meets both, that we would be decreasing the quality of the high school to find someone more compatible with fifth grade.
Yeah, I don't necessarily share that concern, but I understand it. And I think I'll probably allay your concern by saying that we're planning to hire these through Sauhegan and Bill Amherst. So there'll be a Sauhegan hire primarily.
Okay, and I assume the principal would be involved.
Absolutely.
For AMS, okay.
I'll just interject something there. I mean, part of the strategic vision is the mastery learning, right? Is to enable students who can achieve however far they're going to achieve and not weigh them down. So whatever domain leader and process flows down to the middle school, my expectation would be that would be to lift students up, to enable that to happen at a high level, so that you can achieve the affordable next step if that's your goal, so that you can go and have experience about developing a plan of action and where your next steps are going to be. I mean, we're excited about. I would be shocked and disappointed if we didn't go in that direction. So if you sense it, let me know. If anybody does, and we will react.
Yeah, the reason I'm sensitive to that comment is because I believe that AMS has things that they can learn that Sauhegan does well. But I also feel conversely that Sauhegan has things to learn that AMS is doing well. And a two-way relationship is what's important to me. While the curriculum is of a higher intensity at the high school level, clearly, it doesn't mean that Sauhegan doesn't have things to learn from AMS as well. So I'm just being, I'm the parent of two schools that I want to equally represent and love well in public. So.
Right, I
think
just
we're to-
would hate to sacrifice our own needs in order to find someone that's lukewarm.
Agreed.
For our needs.
Agreed.
So. Okay.
Mr. Gronstrom.
Sorry, Pam, where was again?
So before I forget, is there a way, can we get a copy of this presentation sent to us? I think it's very informative and I'd like to use it as reference as we're looking through the budget.
Indeed. We'll email both presentations, this one and Amy's, tomorrow morning.
Perfect. Thanks.
And hold on a second, George, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Great presentation. But I guess my question is this: is this solution here a solution customized for our district, or are we modeling this after some other, I guess, program that's had success for this? How was this developed?
So this is a product of our leadership team evaluating what we need to improve our school system, which is really content-specific instructional support for our teachers. However, that being said, while we've developed this locally, this is something that has been put into place in other places to some success. My previous district reached out to me about 2 years after I came here to say that the single biggest factor that they determined and a huge increase in their statewide test scores was the implementation of these positions in that district. And they feel strongly that it provided the instructional support teachers needed to improve their craft. So while it's something we've developed here, it is something that has been implemented other places to some success.
Thank you.
Stephanie, you got something?
I was just gonna ask, was at least, was the Amherst School Board presented with this future? Looks so they know.
Not yet, Ms. Grund. Don't tell them.
Do not watch this video.
They ran so late, they're all in bed now anyway.
Well, I'm excited to, just to be clear, about Amherst participation in this. I mean, I think that's well overdue, to be honest with you, to have a strong connection between the middle school and the high school. I'm no doubt that there could be mutual learning, but to get into alignment is most important and deploy best practices, right? So that's very, very exciting. And I can't wait to hear how we're going to pay for it.
Okay.
With that, Amy, please, if you're ready. We can banter on if
Did
you
that
need
make it in
a couple
there?
more minutes.
10.
Silence is golden.
I know. Is it not in there? Okay, hold on. Yeah, no, it's not in there. Adam, can you help me? I'm like panicking. No, it's in my, yeah, yeah, I need that slide. Right. I forgot the showstopper. Is it going in? And you're going to put it in by the time I get there? It'll be at the end, so you guys, I can start, right?
Administration team, we're going to recess for class.
Oh, even better.
Technology died by technology.
We back? Okay. Okay, without further ado, I am pleased to present the number side of the FY23 budget. So Article 2, which is the proposed operating budget, which is to raise and appropriate $20,314,850 as the FY23 operating budget. Should this article not pass, the default budget is calculated at $20,144,437. So as a summary, the FY23 proposed budget is $294,292, or 1.47% over the FY22 adopted budget. The FY23 default budget calculation is an increase of $124,334, or 0.62% over the FY22 adopted budget. Difference between the FY22 default and the FY23 proposed is $170,413, or 0.85%. The default calculation is simply the appropriations contained in the FY22 budget reduced or increased by debt service, contracts, one-time expenditures, and other obligations previously incurred or mandated by law. In this calculation, there were additions for contractually obligations, including salaries and benefits, the SAU apportionment, special services, and other miscellaneous costs. Reductions include special warrant articles for the Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund and the Turf Field Revolving Fund, and the one-time expenditure for the secure entrance. The difference between the FY22 budget and the FY23 default calculation is $124,334. There were some additional special education staffing needs for FY23, including a special education teacher, 2 paraprofessionals for new students, and a 0.5 speech pathologist. Health and dental, we have some good news this year. The guaranteed maximum rate, or the GMR, for FY23 was provided to us in early October, and we were pleased to see a 2.7% increase in health insurance and a negative 1.5% decrease in dental. This is great news for the districts.
That's not the guaranteed maximum reduction in dental, is it?
The guaranteed maximum.
They could,
Yeah.
it could reduce more is what I'm saying.
Yeah, true.
They could always go a little
Right.
lower, right?
And just also noting that the PPC agreement will be in its 3rd year next year. And New Hampshire retirement, we're in the 2nd year, so those rates remain flat from last year. The default calculation to the proposed budget is a difference of $170,413. Major drivers for this difference are furniture and equipment needs, additional facilities staffing, and associated benefits. There are reductions in technology, curriculum, and other facilities needs. This slide shows a budget comparison by fund. It shows the largest dollar amount change in the general fund as expected, but a low percentage change. The food service shows the largest increase, which is primarily for equipment and commodities. As a reminder, the goal for the school nutrition service is to be self-funding, so this increase will not affect the tax rate as long as revenue comes in as hoped. The grant fund change just reflects some modest changes in the title grants we receive. These expenditure line items are also offset by grant revenue. Appropriation comparison. This slide provides an appropriation comparison that includes the Expendable Trust Fund warrant article and the Turf Field Revolving Fund contribution for FY23, should the board agree to place these on the ballot. This helps to see an apples to apples comparison that includes the Expendable Trust Fund and the Revolving Fund in both the FY22 adopted and the FY23 proposed budget. And this slide shows the budget to budget comparison from FY22 to 23, categorized according to the Sauhegan Advisory Finance Committee budget committees. Of note, special services are increasing by a little over 8%. Technology is down about 8%. Administration is up about 9%. Facilities is down significantly, even with the proposed addition of facility staff, primarily due to the cost of the secure entrance in FY '22, as well as some other cost savings in facilities. The overall increase from FY '22 to FY '23 is 1.47%. Oh, you're there, yeah. So this is the slide that you were probably waiting to see. This shows some of what Mike was talking about and the changes from FY '22 to FY '23 in regular ed teacher salaries, the addition of the domain leader, which you'll see are split by two different function codes, two different categories. So in FY '22, you see the two domain leaders, but actually, no, I'm sorry. You see the one domain leader that was not classified correctly in FY '22. In FY '23, it's classified correctly. So you'll see half of the two domain leaders in one line and half of the two domain leaders in the other line. You'll also see the change from the administration salaries from FY '22 to FY '23. The bottom line is there's a net reduction of $18,735 when you're looking at regular ed teacher salaries, domain leader salaries, and administration salaries. And finally, yes. So other considerations for the board, you'll need to determine whether to continue with the expendable trust fund contributions per the capital needs assessment funding plan, which for FY '23 is $26,260. Also need to consider whether to continue to contribute to the turf field revolving fund. Last year, this was done through the unassigned fund balance, so as to have sufficient funds to replace the field in several years. The proposal that was put forth was to contribute $85,000 per year for this year and an additional 3 years. Addition, there's been conversations about the science classrooms, and that discussion is continuing and pending JFAC recommendation. In addition, you first heard about the music art domain leader. That would potentially be a K-12 position. And that really concludes my presentation. I will say that the Sauhegan Advisory Finance Committee is up and running, and thanks to Dan for chairing that committee. And I believe we're fully staffed now. Our meetings are set up. Invitations have gone out, and we look forward to continuing the review process. Thank you.
Dan, would you like to just any information from you about or JFAC, or I'm sorry, about Finance Advisory Committee? Your process or what you'd want to see or your goals? I know in the past, for example, that you guys were very interested and keen on seeing, you know, not just 1 year, but several years out. What's the long-term vision? Some of that, we've gotten some bits and pieces of that now. So
yeah,
should
we're
be
always
exciting.
interested in the strategic plan going forward, how the budget helps reach those goals. The strategic vision was very helpful last year, and anything going forward, it's always helpful in our evaluations. The subcommittee meetings are always a great opportunity to ask questions and Michelle and Amy, Michelle last year and Amy, I'm sure this year will be pretty open and, with us as they have been in the past. So I think it should go well.
Great.
We've got a lot of good talent coming back and a lot of new people that are pretty bright and should have some good questions and be able to dig into it pretty well.
Great. Awesome. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Okay. Our turn to noodle. Anybody want to have a question or a comment to share? Budget-wise. Could you?
Yeah, so I'll share the budget file, definitely by tomorrow morning.
Is there a date you want questions put in by? Or
Can start right away. The budget meetings start next week. So ideally, if we have them a couple days before each budget committee meeting, that gives us time to answer the questions. And I think the conversations will be smoother. But certainly we get them last minute and we do our very best to try to answer them, or we can answer them live during the subcommittee meeting.
Tim.
Amy, will you
Yeah.
be posting your presentation as well as?
Yep.
the spreadsheet?
So the presentation will be a link on the table of contents, as well as some other links. And the question submission form will be a link as well.
Perfect.
Yep.
Laura.
Sure.
About the domain leaders stretching out to other districts, and our budget cost per pupil is based on our overall budget. Is that right? And even if we're receiving revenue from the Amherst School District to pay the domain leader's salary, it's still part of our cost per pupil. We can't deduct that. Is that my understanding?
I believe so.
Yeah, we'd have to double check. I think there is some provision for things that have revenue offsets, but it's been 4 years since I've been forced to think that way. But that's a fair point because it could artificially inflate our cost per pupil is what you're saying.
So we have that arrangement with the other districts in terms of facilities as well, where we have their staff in Amherst and they're charged to Sohegan. So it goes both ways. But yes.
The proposed budget, it was a little hard to tell for the domain leaders. We have now two, right? We have a
two.
math science and a humanities.
Yep.
And added to this are two, the performing arts and a science. Is that correct? Is that my understanding?
And world language.
Three. Three are in here.
Performing arts is not in yet.
Performing arts is not in yet.
Oh, okay.
It's not in the budget.
Okay.
As calculated so far, because there's a lot of approvals for that.
Okay, so the domain leaders that are,
But
yeah.
that position has an offset in the Sohegan budget as well. So it wouldn't be a new
What?
position on top of.
Oh, you mean there's
existing
money in the
staff.
default budget calculation and salary to fill this need? That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so the new money, which, where I'm going with it, like, there's two things. One, I want to understand. So what's in the proposed budget right now in particular is the science domain leader and the world languages domain leader. There's the third one that you just explained, which is the performing arts. I'm calling it performing arts as it said music and art. Art isn't necessarily
I haven't
performing
heard
art.
an official name, but
Fine arts, the fine arts domain leader, could we broaden it to a?
For
Are
next
we-
year at the beginning, we're going to, in the next iteration of the proposal, we'll be focusing on the performing arts.
So not art and sculpture and photography and
Just for the
things like
first
that.
year as we
The-
leverage that position for highest value and manageability, implementation, we're talking about just the performing arts.
Okay. So, and for a savings of $18,000+, like you've been really working hard at making this attractive. So I appreciate that. Your hard work is making it a little easier on us, perhaps, in that, at least on that part of it. Laura, one more?
So the domain leader typically is about $85,000 per domain leader. So if we have a less experienced teacher that fills that role, are we still stuck on that salary?
It's negotiable. It's not part of PPC, so we're able to negotiate it directly.
But is there an expectation that we would pay them that even if they don't?
No, we always look at individual situations as individuals, so we wouldn't pay that if we had someone that was, we probably wouldn't hire someone that was brand new to teach Indo because we require them to have a principal cert or because they need to be able to evaluate other teachers. So it's unlikely we would find someone less than 85,000 because if they have a principal cert, they're probably ready to become an assistant principal or the like, but it is possible.
George, do you have a comment before we adjourn?
Yes. In looking at the budget, and thank you for that, but when I look at it, I'm seeing overall increase of almost 1.5% over last year's budget. And, increases are always, relative, so to speak. So to me, that's pretty modest considering some of the things that Adam and Mike have talked about what their goals are and what they're trying to do at Sauhegan. So, certainly I think you'd be commended when you're looking at some of the things you're trying to accomplish and some of the things we need to do to make that happen and to keep that budget modest. But I guess my question is, are we fairly comfortable that this budget will fully support everything that you've just discussed right now?
Yes.
Laura?
So the budget you're proposing has 3 new domain leaders. I don't mean to focus on this, but it's a big change for schools.
It's 3 new positions, 2 of which are included right now in the budget. The third would be a transfer of an existing position for that purpose. Is that fair?
Okay, so,
But yes, the net result is likely to be 3.
Yeah, the third one just hasn't been reclassified.
and we can choose to have an arts domain leader, and then ASD or Mount Vernon can choose to benefit from that if we choose to share it. But we can still have the arts domain leader in our budget, which is current as proposed.
Yeah, this is like 3 keys to the same missile. So we're going to coordinate between all 3 of our districts to see if we all want to turn the key. Not all 3 might, but if any don't, Sauhegan could still choose to have it themselves without having the benefit of getting some revenue from the other 2 districts.
Right, but our current budget includes it
Correct.
without revenue from the other.
Correct. That's right.
Thank you.
Any objections to adjourning? You're- Oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
Budget workshop. Is that something that, is that the one with the League and Finance Committee that we did last year outside of our normal?
Yes, so that is up to you folks, if you would like to do that and schedule that.
I thought those helped a lot last year because it allowed the conversation of questions so League and Finance Committee could talk with us as board members and board members could hear what the finance committee has to say, and we're not taking up a whole nother, or taking up a meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's up to them.
Finance committee appreciated it last year.
We're so behind now.
Why don't we talk about it?
Yeah.
We'll have to schedule them after all the Q&A. The thrust of the Q&A is done anyway. Schedule one soon after that and share minutes and impressions and ideas and thoughts and go from there.
So would you like one following all of the advisory finance committee meetings?
Well, all of the category meetings,
Yep,
subcommittee meetings.
yep,
Then we can start having some workshops.
okay.
I think at least schedule one, because I think that just allowed good flow of communication, where I know in the past, the finance committee felt they weren't
Yep.
being able to give their feedback.
So who would you like at that meeting? The board and advisory finance? Anybody else? Obviously, I will be there.
I mean,
Well, and it's hard to say. Maybe that's enough for the first one.
Okay,
Maybe a little TBD as to the tenor and questions.
okay,
There's a lot of questions on, let's say, facilities side of or
Yep.
whatever, then maybe Roger, or if it's special ed questions, and maybe Meg could pop in for a
sure,
segment.
absolutely.
I just don't know where that's going to go
Yep.
exactly.
All right, so we'll have Abby get that scheduled.
Good catch.
Sounds good.
Done? All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
Sorry, Steve.
Sure.
George,
Torres, yes.
Glover, yes.
Yes.